going on, just so much anger out there, anger at the government, anger at the police now, anger at the media, and your thoughts now as you watch this policing operation, what appears to be bringing this story to an end. We don't know how long that end is going to take, but definitely an overwhelming show of support from Ottawa Police, the RCMP, the OPP, Toronto Police, GTA Police, the Sûreté de Québec, even police, Chris, from as far away as Vancouver.
That's right. I mean, this tremendous show of support. I get the frustration of the members of the public that wish they had seen this weeks ago. Absolutely agree. But that's not what happened. And they are there now. So Ottawa Police has the ability with the partner agencies to try and clean this mess up. They're trying to do it very methodically. Trying not to rile the crowds up. I think Evan should have been a police officer because he's keeping it cooler than I might in that same situation. But that's the goal, is to try and talk it down, talk their way out of things, but get people out. And the time for talk is all but over, but it's still always an option. And they're going to keep pushing in like they have and slowly push people out or arrest them. And I had originally said earlier today, Todd, that I kind of expected this to be over, that part of it, at least not the truck towing, by the end of daylight. That's not going to happen. So they're going to have a presence there all night to not lose any ground, really, and then continue tomorrow. And so this might go on for another day or two.
Yeah, and as night falls, Chris, within the next 20, 25 minutes or so, what does that do to this whole operation for police?
Well, it really it complicates it. It makes it a little more dangerous because we still don't know what's in those trucks. We still don't know what some of those people in the crowd are carrying, and they may not be carrying fire.
All right, Chris, I'm just going to jump in here because we're now looking at footage of police on horseback who are now establishing. I believe some of those police are from Toronto.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Evan.
Let's go.
Yeah, Evan's going to move out of the way. Our cameras are going to move out of the way to a safer spot.
Very quick now. Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on.
You call this appropriate?
All right. So Todd, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so there was just a major move from the police line. Again, they're pushing up. The riot police on the horseback just came up and they moved the line. The line was just pressed back. So the tension is definitely going up here now. There's no question right now. Temperatures going up.
Face, by the way. A cop just punched me in the face. Do you want to tell that to CTV? Right there just punched me in the face. Literally punched me in the face. And I didn't touch him. I never touched him. I stood there and he punched me 3 times.
So here's a protester that just says she was punched. So you can get a sense here, Todd, at the front line. The temperature's going up here. Their tension's going up. There's as the line is moving.
All right, Evan, we're going to jump out and bring back Chris Lewis into the conversation. Okay. Very volatile situation, of course. Evan is right there on the front line. His cameraman is there too, talking to protesters, being verbally insulted and catcalled by those same protesters who are both angry at the media for our coverage, but yet they want the coverage. And Chris Lewis is joining us too. Chris, you know, the tactic we're going to see now, because as they push, and we're looking at the footage here, they're basically pushing the protesters along Rideau. Soon will become Wellington when you get over the canal there. They're basically pushing them westward toward the Parliament Hill and that whole area. But at what point do you start to go in and actually make arrests? Just give me a sense operationally as you're pushing forward. Eventually, you're going to have to start pulling people out of the crowd if they don't disperse willingly.
That's right, and it's really difficult to tell from the the limited perspective, and the incident commanders for the public order side of this are on the ground. They're watching it, they're hearing it, and they get a sense of what to tell the different units and squads to do. So they'll say push left, back up here, go right, based on what they're seeing live, and those are difficult calls, but they do it based on years of doing that job and knowing it much better than I do, and then knowing all the dynamics in terms of the intelligence information on top of what they can actually see in front of their eyes. But that is the ultimate goal. Eventually, when they push, they're going to start yanking some people out of that crowd, throwing them in behind, surrounding them with officers, and then getting them out of there. But you can't do that quickly with hundreds of people. You can only do a couple here, a couple there, and slowly pick through and hope that some see the better judgment plays in and they start to realize I'm not going to win this fight. But what you see here, Todd, largely is what was an issue from the beginning, was the lack of resources. How could you ever do that with less than all the resources you have and still have backup resources and other special units to relieve these guys, because they can't work 24 hours a day. And so for every officer you see, there's another one out there somewhere trying to get ready to come in to help or relieve the officers that are there, as well as all the roadblocks and checkpoints. This is huge, absolutely huge operation.
And we're being very cautious and careful, Chris, with the footage that we do show because of the volatility of the situation. Just want to point that out to our viewers here. We have our correspondents out on the ground, but as you can see, night is falling now over Ottawa. I just want to ask you real quick about the evening factor here as things get dark and what that does to police. You started to answer that, and I had to cut away to go to Evan. Can you just tell us, from a police point of view, what that means now as night approaches?
Well, it's kind of like when you were a kid and playing hide and go seek. It was easier to play in the dark. And they're basically faced, it's a simple analogy, but they're basically faced with that. Once it's dark, they can't see where people are as easily. It becomes a lot more difficult to manage. It's easy to throw a brick or something at police when you're at a corner and you can jump behind the corner. They don't even know where you are in the dark. So the threat gets a little bigger. The possibility of projectiles or even firearms in the dark increases because it's easier to hide and manage from the bad guy perspective. So that may never happen, but it's still, they have to be thinking that way. There was a cache of guns seized in Coutts, Alberta, and the Minister of Justice related that to this protest. So police are on edge. And, from physical violence, and that's why they paid the big bucks, although they don't want it, and I don't blame them. But they're also facing those unknowns because they don't know what's in pockets or in trucks that are still there that haven't been cleared. And so it just kind of puts it makes it a little scarier in the dark, for lack of a better term.
Chris Lewis, CTV public safety analyst, with his insights. Chris, stand by, because I want to bring in our bureau chief in Ottawa, Joyce Napier, who is in the capital today following all of this. We're also looking at the horses, Joyce, that are moving in. These, we believe, are from Toronto, police from Toronto, that were sent in with the horseback riding police there moving through the capital. Mubin Sheikh is also joining us. He's a security expert as well. Joyce, your thoughts on what we're seeing?
Well, it's so interesting to see this because we have seen practically no action for the last 3 weeks. So we've gone from 0 to 100 in a few hours. This morning it was still quiet. Checkpoints were set all around the city, about 100 checkpoints. So it was hard to get. We are right in the middle of this. Our offices are right here. So it was hard to get here, even with our passes. And then the operation started. We thought it may start in the cover of darkness, but it didn't. It started this morning, and then we realized how many police were in Ottawa. For those of us who live in Ottawa, in the dormant city of Ottawa, this is extraordinary. These are images that people who are born and raised here have never seen. And, I know Mr. Lewis was talking about this various challenges. In other words, when it gets dark, what to find in the trucks. These people could run down the many streets around this area and hide. So it will be challenging. Another big challenge, and I'm asking that question to our experts, is those children. We have seen over the past 3 weeks so many children. There were bouncy castles, there were playgrounds, people telling us that it was like camping, almost oblivious to the fact that there was a buildup, and a political one and a law enforcement one. So my question is, obviously the fact that we know there are children there, we don't know if any of these children are gone, if all of them are gone, if some of them are still in some of those vehicles and some of those trucks. This is an added difficulty for the police. How do they deal with that?
Yeah, let's bring in Mubin Sheikh. Mubin, if you could hear us there, your thoughts on what Joyce was saying.
Yeah, first of all, it's just despicable for parents to be bringing their children to this event. They knew exactly what they were doing when they brought their kids. And the purpose of this was to portray a narrative that this is a protest, quote unquote, made up of normal people, families, trying to make it a very family-friendly event, trying to be very careful not to make this into an aggressive event so that they could say, look, we're just peaceful protesters. And we already heard, some days ago when City of Ottawa Children's Aid Societies were making comments around this of worried about the children's safety, children being subjected to truck fumes all day and all night, living in really cramped quarters, no real hygiene, no school, and worst, and I don't think we have ever seen this in our history, that people have been using their children as human shields. And that's exactly the term to use. They were literally putting their children in front of them as the police were approaching. So this just lends, just shows an aggravating factor and shows really how despicable all of this is.
Hey, Mubin, I just want to read something too live to you on the air as we continue our coverage here. This is just coming from Ottawa Police via Twitter, Mubin. Let me read it. Protesters are assaulting officers. They are assaulting officers, have attempted to remove officers' weapons. All means of de-escalation have been used to move forward in our goal of returning Ottawa to its normalcy. Your immediate thoughts on that?
Yeah, it reminds me of January 6th, actually, when the insurrectionists were doing the exact same to police, exact same thing. I have no doubt that these individuals would use those weapons on the police, and what an atrocious situation we would find ourselves in if that was to happen. So it just shows you again that we're not dealing with, normal protests.
And also for police, the challenge in trying to bring this to a peaceful, and I underline and emphasize the word peaceful, and the amount of restraint that we've seen from police.
Is that for me? I thought that might be for Chris.
No, that is for you. Your thoughts on just sort of how police have handled this over the last, well, now we're looking at about 7-8 hours or so.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to the police situation. When about 8,000 people showed up at the beginning, the police were completely outnumbered. There's no way that they could get they couldn't really do much. I understand people were demanding that police enforce, and that will be discussed, I'm sure, in the days to come. But the police have been handling it very, very well. Some people might say a little too peacefully, in that they weren't seen confronting protesters, saying things, just being violent, mindlessly violent. So let's have some patience for the police. They really have a really tough job, and I think they've been doing very well thus far. Our
Bureau Chief Joyce Napier is with us too, and Joyce, just an unprecedented situation for the capital, as you're very familiar with, unlike anything Ottawa has ever seen before.
Absolutely. And, at the beginning, and I think that's what irritated a lot of residents here in Ottawa, is that we saw the police actually, once the trucks were in place in front of the Parliament and, spread all over what is now known as the red zone, police were actually seemed to be almost sympathetic to the truckers, even when they were honking day and night, which the mayor called noise pollution. So, if Ottawans are irritated against police, there is a reason. They were helping them bring fuel to their trucks. Look, we don't want people to freeze to death in their trucks, understandably, but they were encouraging them. We saw them carrying food. We saw them, helping them out. Now, we don't want anybody to not be warm and minus 30 temperatures, because the capital gets really, really cold at night. But on the other hand, is that really the role of the police to be helping them out? So that's what happened, and that's when the criticism really started. And at the same time, the politicians were all silent. The Prime Minister was nowhere to be seen. The Premier was, nowhere to be heard. And the Mayor of Ottawa was asking for a negotiation with these people. So, if the residents of Ottawa are frustrated, there are good reasons. More as frustrated against the so-called, freedom convoy, as much as they are against their politicians, who really, there was a lack of leadership and also a lack of law and order for 2 full weeks you really didn't know when this would come to an end as more and more truckers were coming in, and the weekends became one big giant party in front of Parliament. You know, and nobody's against parties. We all like them. But, you know, the chief of police who resigned last week asked for more help, asked for reinforcements. So the reinforcements are here now. The question is that anybody who lives in Ottawa is asking is, how did it take 3 weeks? So I want to ask Mr. Lewis, is there an explanation as to why this took this long to be where we are today?
You know, I don't have an answer, but I certainly agree with everything you're saying. The politicians, you know, the poor planning at the front end caused this thing to be entrenched in the city. There was a lack of enforcement. Absolutely. You know, I've heard it time and time again and saw video footage of some of it. Now, you know, an inquiry will sort some of this out later. But I'm also hearing that there was orders, you know, from very high up in the police department to officers not to take action because they didn't want to inflame it, et cetera. So some of that will be true, some not, I assume. Still wrong. Absolutely get the perception. Why it took 3 weeks to get the number of people here from other departments that it did, I don't get. I know it's challenging because the OPP and the RCMP, they're very understaffed, and some of their communities are running short of officers now. So how do you get more to, you know, to come to Ottawa, where there was a time we could have got 1,000 in probably within 2 days, but we had a lot more people in those days too, which is a different failure within policing, the policing community. So there's no excuses for a lot of it, Joyce, for sure. Some of it we'll never know the truth until there's people actually testify at an inquiry in a hearing of some sort, because there were some very strategic mistakes made, and allegedly from the uniform side perspective at a high level, without naming names, there was mistakes. There was direction given to officers that frustrated them as much did frustrate the community, and then other officers acting of their own accord supportive of the truckers, and they need to be dealt with from the disciplinary perspective, but not all of them.
We're going to go back on the streets as well as we continue to follow this, because Evan Solomon is standing by. Evan, what's happening where you are right now?
Going on people with their horses.
So we are just up again from the line. There's the Chateau Laurier. The line is moved up. When the police use the officers and the horses, there is a confrontation with the protesters. We just saw one protester literally carried out by others up the street. She's obviously been hurt. So what's happening at the front line when they move that line is very real. And we've seen that. As I said, one protester told me she'd been punched. In the meantime, the line holds and then it moves and it holds and it moves. And more protesters are moving down there from Parliament Hill down in front of the Chateau. But again, this is the situation.
Right here, and we are off
and
the map. We are being fried here.
And then we've got obviously a lot of people who are obviously very, very angry about lots of different things. And
send help!
hang on. Okay, so there's protesters there that believe that there's electromagnetic weapons because their cell phones are dying. There's a lot of cell phone coverage that drops around here. And one of the protesters saying, one guy saying that. But look, I will say this, that, you know, in talking to all these folks, Todd, you know, we're all about maybe 50 feet from the front line. People are talking, they're expressing their point of view, and they're here because despite the Emergencies Act and despite 22 days, they believe that their protest still matters. And their protest about the Emergencies Act and the vaccine mandate is real. This is a real feeling that whatever happens on this patch of ground or on that patch of ground, the feeling that these people have is not changing. And that's going to be something that whatever happens today, tomorrow, and the next day, the country's going to be thinking about and dealing with. So in the meantime, Todd, on the ground, as you say, you've got a grandmother, you've got people from all walks of life who are here still, despite the police action going on and continuing for the next, we don't know how long, day or two. Todd.
Yeah, and also, Evan, you raise a great point. You know, the risk here of you know, marginalizing some of the voices or just dismissing them out of hand as radicals, saying they're not representative. But as we see, they are representative, and there are certainly signs they have a lot of support in different parts of the country.
It's very dangerous to generalize, and if you talk to any of the protesters, one of the things that infuriates a lot of people here is the generalizing. You say we are X or Y. People here, as I've spoken to, for lots of different reasons. On the other side, the government's view in invoking the Emergencies Act is, after 22 days of what has been a protest that has been going on, they believe the law has been violated, it's risen to a certain threshold, and they're going to enforce the law and take back the streets. The residents of Ottawa are very frustrated. But again, you have to, you have to realize here that whatever happens here, Todd, the governments at all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, have to realize that after 2 years of COVID, changes are going on. Now, what those are remains to be seen. But let me just show you. There's a protest here in the nation's capital that is still going on, despite the government saying there's going to be severe penalties, despite the fact that some people have been arrested and will go to prison. Despite that, these people are still here to express their point of view. And that shows you how passionately they feel about it. Now, at this point, again, we haven't seen there's, it's tense at the line. And as you saw when we were just there, it gets very tense. But so far, the police, they move, they stop, they move, they stop. And in the kind of spectrum of riot control or things, so far this would be on the calmer end. It doesn't mean that every moment's been calm, but the protesters and the police have not, it hasn't blown up into a big clash yet. I'll throw it back to you, Todd.
All right, Evan Solomon there on the streets of Ottawa. They're watching what's happening in real time here, ongoing coverage of these protests in the capital as we've been bringing them to you throughout the day. We know close to 100 arrests have been made, but there's now a lot of angry jostling going on, confrontations going on. The police have been showing a remarkable degree of restraint for the past 7-8 hours or so as this has continued. But as you can see, it's starting to get dark in Ottawa. It's going to get a lot colder than it has already been, and it has been very cold throughout the day. Happy to have the mayor of Ottawa, Jim Watson, joining us with his thoughts today. Mayor Watson, appreciate your time amid all of this. Your take on what we're seeing here in the streets of your city.
Well, thank you, Todd, for the invitation. Obviously, very concerned. I think the morning session and last night went quite well. We're now getting into a more hardened group that are entrenched, that don't seem to have any regard for the rule of law. And I have great admiration for the patience of our police officers. They're put under a very difficult circumstance. They're being spat upon, yelled at, and they're true professionals, as Chief Bell said at the news conference today. So it's disheartening to see this come to this situation. I would have preferred, quite frankly, that the whole thing would have been wrapped up a day or two after the day they had their protest. That's how most protests work. You come, you protest, then you leave. These people camped out, and it just got worse and worse. We had to get extra resources. We're appreciative of the other municipal police forces and the Premier and the Prime Minister for providing additional RCMP and OPP. And as the images show on your network, Todd, thank God we had those extra resources, because this is far from over. We've done very well. I have great faith in the plan that the Chief has put forward. But now with the nighttime coming, the colder weather, people start to act up even more, as we're seeing just in the last half hour. This has to be brought to a conclusion as quickly as possible and as safely as possible to avoid any loss of life or serious injury.
And Jim, I just want to bring in our bureau chief to the conversation in Ottawa, Joyce Napier. Joyce.
Hi, Mayor. Thanks for being there. But you call them hardened group that is entrenched, yet you negotiated with some of these people. You even invited them to move their trucks and their vehicles onto Wellington, which is, for the people who are listening to us, that big street right in front of Parliament, giving them an incredible legal argument against the fact that they are an illegal occupation, seeing that they were invited by the mayor to be there. So a lot of us have asked ourselves the question, why did you tell them to come to more trucks to come and park on Wellington?
Well, because, Joyce, my number one preoccupation was to give some relief to the residential communities that have been the hardest hit. You know, we sit comfortably in our homes and offices and studios. These people have been put through sheer hell for the last 21 days. And we managed to get over 102 big rigs out of the residential neighborhoods that were spewing diesel and gasoline 24 hours a day, catcalling people, yelling and screaming, homophobic slurs and the like. And as I said, my preoccupation was, how do we help those people who are trapped in their homes, their condos, their apartments?
I lost.
That we give some relief to those individuals.
But you gave them a big legal argument, because if the occupation is illegal, they can tell you that they, well, no, it isn't. We were invited to come here by the mayor of Ottawa. So,
well, I don't know where you got your.
I understand. I understand that you wanted to get them out of those neighborhoods. I live in Ottawa. I totally understand that. But bringing them on Wellington and then saying that now it is illegal sounds like a bit of a contradiction. A lot of people were asking themselves that question, Mayor.
Yeah, and when it's explained to them, number one, I had a legal opinion that it was not what you're suggesting, so I'm not sure where your legal opinion is from. And secondly, I didn't hear a lot of other suggestions from other people how we get some of these big rigs off streets like Kent and Metcalfe and O'Connor, which are residential streets. The farther south you go, they become more and more residential. And we had heard the pleas from people in Centretown and from all different parts of the urban core that this was just debilitating for the people, the men, women, and children that live in Centretown. And my obligation as mayor is to do whatever I can to protect those individuals, not the truckers. If we get the truckers out of there, that's a good deal for those people who haven't got a good night's sleep in over 3 weeks.
But you've been asking for help, Mayor, and you have been asking for help since day one. You asked for help from the province. You asked for help from everyone. How difficult, and why do you think it was so difficult for you to get that help?
Well, at times it was frustrating, and that's why I went to speak to the Premier and the Prime Minister personally to explain the situation. We sent them the letter asking for additional resources. And to the credit of the provincial government and the federal government, they did provide us incremental increases in officers over the course of the last couple of weeks. But we needed a big infusion of officers, just as we saw in Windsor. It worked quite well, sort of this massive number of OPP and Windsor and RCMP. And now we have those officers. If your station's been reporting, you see police officers from Durham, Gatineau, Sûreté du Québec, Toronto. It's been all hands on deck, and I'm very appreciative of our municipal partners providing those officers, because, as you know, we just saw the skirmish that took place just 5 minutes ago. It's a very serious situation. If we don't have the resources and the police officers to back up all of the legal documents that we throw at these people, it won't be worth the paper it's written on. We have to get them out of town. They have to go back to their own communities. They seem to be confused that most of the mandates have nothing to do with certainly the municipal government, and very few have to do with the federal government. They should go and lobby their provincial governments and leave our town so we can clean the place up, because it's turned into a complete pigsty, urinating all over the place, having pig roasts, and showing such insensitivity to the residents of this city. Can you imagine in their neighborhood if a bunch of 18-wheelers decided to come and honk their horn all night, all day, have a pig roast, an illegal fire, drinking in public? They wouldn't want it at all. So I think it's time for them to leave, and for their relatives, quite frankly, if they're seeing this on television, they should call their relatives who are staking out in Wellington and say, get the hell home, because you're going to lose your truck, you're going to lose your license, it's going to be impounded, it's going to be sold off, you won't be able to go to the United States as a trucker. You have everything to lose under the Emergency Act. So I don't quite understand why they're digging in, particularly when so many provinces are removing many restrictions from COVID-19.
All right, we're listening to the mayor of Ottawa there, Jim Watson, who's giving us his take on the situation here, and the sort of nature as this plays out now. It's 5:35 Eastern Time here in the capital as we continue to bring you ongoing coverage. Here's what we know so far. As we're showing you on your screen, 70 people have been arrested and 21 vehicles towed so far. In all likelihood, that number is much higher now because we see police moving in. If Jim Watson is still there, Mayor Watson, I think I can see you. You know, are you getting any sense of how long this might be able, this might go on for before police are able to end it? And I appreciate this is an ongoing operational situation here, and you as the mayor, there's obviously a firewall there between you and the police department, but your sense, because this is the long weekend, as you just said, Family Day weekend coming up. This is an unprecedented situation for Ottawa, and you've got so many police in the streets. Any indication on your point of view here?
Yeah, Todd, I don't want to put undue pressure on our police service by me musing about when the city is going to return back to normal. It's certainly going to take some time, first and foremost, to get the people and then the vehicles, and then to go in and clean up the mess that's been created there by these individuals who seem to have no respect for symbols or for human beings, namely the citizens of this city. So it's going to take some while, and it's also going to require a go-forward plan so that, do we have to maintain a closure of Wellington Street in front of the Parliamentary Precinct, for instance? If that's the recommendation of the police, then our Public Works Department has to make sure that takes place, because the last thing we need is to get everyone out of town and then all of a sudden a bunch of yahoos say, let's go back to Ottawa. We can't allow this to happen again.
Mayor, it's Joyce again. I'm just curious about one thing, because we know that Fridays or Thursday evenings is when a lot of people came into the city for the weekend to party. Are you seeing a lot of that? Are you seeing a lot of people trying still, despite what's going on now, still trying to get into the city?
Well, I'm sure there have been calls, as you know, Joyce, from the group, the organizers, to ask people to come and replenish their individuals, which is completely irresponsible. We have the 100 checkpoints where people can't get in unless they have a legitimate piece of identification that they work or live in the downtown core. So we're trying to cut off all those opportunities for those people to come into the city and cause havoc. And we're doing that in collaboration with the Ontario Provincial Police in terms of off-ramps to the 417. So, there's no question a city as large as ours, there may be people that can get through, but I think the police have done a really good job of creating some kind of an ironclad around the city. And unless you have a reason to be in the downtown, you shouldn't be in the downtown. And that goes also for our own residents. It's tough to say that, but we need to ensure that we have as few people as possible in and around the area, which is a very dangerous area, occupied by some very dangerous people.
Jim Watson is the mayor of Ottawa. Mr. Watson, thanks so much for this volatile situation in your city. We really appreciate you taking a bit of time, though, on a very busy day to join us here on CTV News Channel. Give us your thoughts.
Great. Thank you for the invitation.
We are hearing as well from our CTV producer in Ottawa, Mackenzie Gray, that pepper spray is being used now by police. Let's bring in our security panel, former police officers, homicide detectives, as well as national security analysts. We've got Chris Lewis, Mark Mendelson, Mubin Sheikh. Gentlemen, you've been great throughout the day, bringing us your expertise and your insights. Let me start with you, Chris Lewis, if I can. You ran the Ontario Provincial Police Force for many years. Your thoughts on the word that pepper spray is now being deployed. Give us a sense of what that means, what it doesn't mean.
Well, it's getting fairly serious when they use pepper spray, because it not only does it disadvantage the protesters, it disadvantages the police. Ultimately, masks can get ripped off as you're making arrests. I've had that happen to me. It is not fun. You're right out for a minute or two. And you have to wear a mask. It's uncomfortable. Your field of vision is not as good as it was, and your breathing is different. And so police do not want to use tear gas if they can avoid it. So if that's happening, they feel that they're losing control a little bit, or it's at a kind of a dangerous point that they have to go to that step.
Yeah, and Mark, I just want to again read the tweet, and I've got it here, that was sent out by Ottawa Police about 25 minutes ago. It says the following: protesters are assaulting officers, have attempted to remove officers' weapons. All means of de-escalation have been used to move forward in our goal of returning Ottawa to its normalcy. What do you make of that, Mark?
Well, it's not surprising, to be frank. I mean, if people are trying to remove the different uses of force available to officers that are on their gun belts, then yeah, they have the right to use a proportionate amount of force. And it's like Chris said, nobody likes to get pepper sprayed. I mean, we've all been pepper sprayed if you've been on the job. It's not fun. However, if somebody's reaching for your gun or reaching for your electrical weapon, your taser, things of that nature, I mean, these are serious events taking place. And when you're in a crowd, it's even more complicated and even more tense. So for an officer to pull out his pepper spray, if that was the case, you know, we need more information as to what the circumstances were. But I mean, up to this point, I think that, you know, and we've been on all day, Todd, and I was on with Marcia and with Evan. I think that the officers, you know, that are there now have acted in a very disciplined, very professional and very well-trained way up to this point. And I don't see anything changing, you know, from this point moving forward. You know, use of force is available to officers. And if they're being assaulted, if they're being threatened, then they have every right in the world to disengage from that, to arrest those people, charge them with assault police. We hope it doesn't go there. But in terms of the yelling and the screaming, I mean, listen, if you signed up for this job, you're going to be yelled at and screamed at, as we all have been for decades. And, you know, that just goes right off your back. But when it comes to grabbing your firearms or other use of force weapon, you know, availability that's on your belts, that's a very different story. What we've seen change in the last little bit, and it was clear as bell on one of the video shots we had, is when the Toronto police horses, when the mounted unit moved in, maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, when Evan Solomon was reporting, the mounted unit and those horses are an exceptional deterrent in situations like this. And, you know, officers will tell you that one horse is worth 30 officers in terms of how they can disperse a crowd, because people are intimidated naturally by horses, and these horses are big and they're very well trained, and you know, and their riders are excellent handlers. And these horses that come from Toronto, they're in demonstrations all the time. Nothing that can be done to them is going to faze these horses. But there's certainly an escalation. It's getting dark. We don't know where they're going to disperse to, if at all. We don't know if people are going to get into beer or other things, and you know, have a sense of bravado when the sun goes down under the cover of darkness.
Right.
But from this point right now, Todd, I mean, I think that the police have been admirable in the way they've handled things in a professional, well-trained manner, and I expect them to carry on that way. The good thing is that RCMP, OPP, Toronto, Quebec, they've all been trained pretty well on the same model in terms of crowd control and things of that nature. And much was learned in the G20 that we're not seeing here now. So good lessons learned, and we're seeing sort of the fruits of that training coming through now. But, you know, people are going to get arrested. You're right. They're not leaving. You know, and they may decide when it gets colder and darker throughout the night that some of them are going to leave, but this is still going to take a day or two to clean up, Todd.
Yeah, let's bring in Mubin Sheikh to the conversation too, who is a national security analyst, lives in Ottawa, teaches at Carleton University as well. Mubin, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the following. So we know that there were a couple of key organizers involved with the protests, and we know sometimes these protests, you know, there's so-called leaders, but oftentimes, you know, they take on a life of their own. That being said, Tamara Leach and others were arrested. And I'm curious whether you think that makes a difference here in terms of the people we're still seeing out on the streets as we follow some of these confrontations and the jostling and the back and forth that's going on. What do you think, Mubin?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the arresting of the leaders is, of course, very important. I mean, it shows that the police are going after the command structure, if you will, not just the convoy organizers, but the financiers or the financial organizers, people who have been online openly counseling to commit mischief, which is the charge that, or counseling to obstruct police, which is, you know, for those who have been telling the public, you know, ignore the police, ignore what they're saying, or worse, telling other police officers to basically throw away their careers and come down here and join the party. So it's a very significant step, very important, and very much a normal course of enforcement, you know, in this context.
All right, and Joyce Napier standing by. Yeah, Joyce, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for either Chris Lewis or Mark Mendelson, because there's another challenge here, is that you've got, I think, three kinds of protesters here, and Evan was saying, you know, you can't generalize, Todd, and you can't, because really there are different kinds of people we've spoken to. So there's the happy-go-lucky people, you know, the ones that are all about peace and love and are here and are partying, and then you've got the angry people, the people who have nothing to lose. They've lost their jobs. Their families have turned their backs on them. They can't work. They can't go to stores. They can't go to restaurants. You know, they feel that they have been, you know, sort of kicked out of society. And then you have a more sinister group, as it right-wing groups, you know, fundamentalist Christian groups, bikers. So that would make the job of the police, again, because I've seen it for days and days and days, how difficult it must be to untangle all this, because it's very different crowds with different agendas, really. You know, those who just want the mandates lifted to those who want to overthrow the government and, you know, sort of take over the country. So how does a police moving in right now, as they're doing, how do you deal with that? How do you distinguish the more sinister elements to the people who are there and are thinking that this is perfectly legal but are not dangerous?
Yeah, Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, and I don't disagree with Joyce's theory, the different types of protesters. Some are very passive, they just want to make a point, and they want to make it in a nice way. It's those, as you increase in kind of intensity, really, or at all times, I should say, police have to judge their decision-making and their use of force based on what they're confronted with. So it could be a big, mean-looking human being, but if it's just singing and dancing and happy as can be, if they're not aggressive, they're not pushing on police, they're not, you know, and they're not doing something aggressive, you still can't use force on them. You know, so, but it could be the, you know, the 80-year-old lady that just comes charging up and starts hitting the police, and then they have to, you know, act accordingly. They're not going to punch her out, but they're certainly going to hold her hands and use some level of force against her. So sometimes it's a whole crowd of one or the other. Sometimes it's pockets of one or the other, and sometimes there's a whole group of one type with a couple others in the middle. So you really struggle then, because the next person to get in your face, where do they fit in that kind of continuum? And you have to judge yourself accordingly, because if you can't articulate later why you did whatever, number one, you have to live with yourself, and number two, you have to defend yourself and tell the truth. So you have to be able to explain it and justify why you did whatever you did.
And, you know, Joyce, I think that's such a great way to put it, that the people who are out there in the streets can be divided into different categories. And let me ask Mubin Sheikh to weigh in on that, because there are some people, Mubin, who perhaps feel they don't have anything to lose. You know, and when we say, you know, well, the people are going to get fined, they're going to get arrested, their licenses might be taken away. You could be dealing with people who feel that their lives have been totally damaged, perhaps irrevocably, by this ongoing pandemic. And so the idea of, you know, you go to jail, you get massive fines, you lose your license. You know, if they don't feel they have anything to lose, the calculation is a little different, Mubin.
Well, I would suggest that they, in fact, have not really dealt with any real consequences. You know, they live in a very privileged fantasy world where they believe they are the patriots and they can do no wrong, and then they're going to realize that, in fact, you're going to get arrested and you're going to get charged, and most likely that charge will be upheld in a court of law. And mischief is one of those crimes that the U.S. considers to be a crime of moral turpitude. I mean, they will permanently exclude you from the U.S. So I think a lot of these people just have not really had any kind of consequences, and they're still in this little dream state. But if I can just quickly on the not labeling all the people in the same category, I totally agree, of course. I mean, it is a overwhelmingly peaceful protest, notwithstanding the intimidations, you know, of the residents and, you know, violence of sound, I guess, of the truck horns. It is overwhelmingly a peaceful protest or peaceful assembly. However, obviously it's been declared unlawful, so it's no longer a legal protest. But the convoy organizers themselves are openly racist. They're far-right extremists. I mean, Pat King, who they've been trying to distance themselves from, has been talking about, you know, white replacement, Holocaust denial. But even if you listen to the other convoy organizers, they've said openly racist, bigoted things. So that's the convoy organizers. Now, when it comes to the majority of the participants or the participants that are there, obviously I would not say that they all share, you know, that would be guilt by association, of course. But you do have a lot of people here who share those views. And the only place that I will, because some people were trying to, you know, push in the use of the word terrorism, that arrest at the Coutts border crossing, I believe absolutely fits the definition of terrorism. This was a small group of people not connected to the convoy itself, who were basically had illegal weapons lying in wait to kill the police. And if you imagine if this was a group of brown Muslim guys with guns looking to kill cops, we'd be immediately calling it terrorism. So that's how I think we can use the labels to describe the people that are there now.
We have some new video that we're going to play. This is of a woman who has just been pepper sprayed by police. We know that's now happening in Ottawa, and we're going to play that for our viewers now, just to give you a sense, just one small snapshot of what's happening in Ottawa right now.
Come with me. I know. The veterans at the War Memorial, their red tent has bottles of water. Take my flag, take my flag. Chemical weapons used against them. So here's a woman with pepper spray on her face. You know how it is, guys. Chemical weapons on their own people. And you know if I check out the RF meter, we're also getting fried. Let's check that right now.
All right, and we just want to be clear here that we believe that was pepper spray that was deployed by police. And, you know, we're getting some live pictures coming in. The sun is set in Ottawa. It's starting to get much colder now. We still see a lot of police as they continue to move in. We've got our security experts standing by. We've got our bureau chief in Ottawa, Joyce Napier, standing by as well, trying to make sense of all of this. And Joyce, you know, one of the things I think is important to point out is the sheer level of anger. And I want to get your sense of this, the sheer level of anger that a lot of these people have against Justin Trudeau himself. And there was one moment in the crowd where, you know, Evan Solomon was out there, and I heard somebody say, you know, they were yelling and making all sorts of offensive remarks about the Prime Minister. They also said, you know, you're lucky you're not in Alberta. And I thought that was sort of an interesting comment that was made. Your sense of the level of vitriol against this Prime Minister?
Well, I do believe that that is what is uniting them, because they are different groups. But I do agree with Mubin that, you know, there is, you know, a lot of white supremacy, a lot of conspiracy theories I've heard over the last few weeks as well. But they are united by a profound, you know, dislike of the Prime Minister. You know, there are, you know, some mandates that are federal, and there are mandates that are provincial. And many of the provincial mandates is what they are complaining about, but they still don't hate the Premier, they hate the Prime Minister. So that is what is interesting, and that's why I'm talking about conspiracy theories, because they sometimes don't understand or don't seem to understand, you know, the different levels of government. I don't want to get into that, God knows, but there are different levels of government, there are different responsibilities. That's the reality of our country. It can get quite complicated sometimes, we all know that. But, you know, the trucker mandates, that was Trudeau. 90% of the truckers were vaccinated, 10% were not. These are people who spend most of their time inside their trucks. Was there a necessity to do that? But the Americans have done that just the same. So even if Trudeau lifts those mandates, the Americans still have them. So it's kind of interesting, and you can't explain that to them, because when you get into a conversation with them, they don't like the media. They don't like what they call the lame or mainstream media. So it is, as you saw with Evan, sometimes a little bit difficult to have conversations with them. But I was with them the day the flyers were distributed. and I would go up and ask them. So, and it was clear that you will have your license suspended, your car will get seized, you will not be able to go to the United States, you will have a criminal record. There were all sorts of warnings, and they laughed them out. They thought that they were winning and Justin Trudeau would lose. So I don't know in what reality that's the way you overthrow a government. It is sometimes a lot of incoherent talk, but again, these are people who are angry, even those who are dancing, even those in the hot tubs, even those who brought their kids and said, "Hey, this is fun. It's like camping," are angry and deeply angry. And I think that is something that this country will have to deal with even after these truckers are gone. Yeah, well said, that we're not being listened to, that our voices are not being heard, that we don't feel we have political representation, even by the Conservative Party, as the case may be. Some of them may be supportive of the People's Party of Canada under Maxime Bernier. We don't know that. Some might be just alienated by the entire political system and feel that they don't recognize their own country, and they don't recognize the way that this federal government has conducted itself, and hence the idea that they want Justin Trudeau to resign. Of course, the Prime Minister was re-elected just back in late September, and as Joyce was talking about, this understanding of the way the Canadian system works, and Joyce is right to point out we don't want to get into that, but certainly some of the protesters have indicated they think the Governor General of Canada is the one who calls the shots. We know that's largely a ceremonial role. They've also indicated the Senate of Canada is the one that may have a lot of power. Of course, the Senate is an appointed body, not an elected body. It's the House of Commons that is elected, of course, MPs across the country, and the Prime Minister himself, who is the leader. It's just, there's so much, the soundscape is just so intense, it's impossible to make you out at this point. But what we are seeing, clear indication now that this massive show of force by police, they're starting to move in, they're starting to make arrests, and these protesters, certainly a hardcore group, not going anywhere. You can see them, they're shuffling, they're angry, they're shouting, they're pushing back at police. And the police starting to decide, look, we've got to go now, we've got to move in, we've got to clear this area, which you can see just in the background there, that's the Chateau Laurier, of course, that just in the background, that beautiful hotel in Ottawa. We've got Evan Solomon there as well, and his cameramen who are there. They're being catcalled, they're being shouted at, they're being insulted as well. Evan, I think we may have you back here. Am I correct in saying they're moving forward here now?
Yeah, they are definitely moving forward. Every couple of minutes, you're getting the police line moving forward. To my left, Todd, you can see now the police on horseback are moving in to give support to the other officers. And of course, the protesters are chanting freedom. And here come the riot police on their horses. And this is the biggest escalation we've seen so far, Todd.
That's what it is.
And obviously now the police on horses are moving to reinforce, and the protesters are filming them. They're pressing back at the front, and here at the back, as some of them are saying, they're very peaceful. And of course, we're experiencing the same catcalls from various people. And some of the protesters here are saying we have been
anymore midnight.
A resolution to this. The question, Todd, is where do these people go from here? Do they pop up somewhere else? Those that haven't been arrested, those that don't have bail conditions, where are they going to go? Is Kingston next? Do they cross the river and go to Gatineau? Do they come to Toronto? Do they go to the Peace Bridge? And that's a lot of police intelligence that's involved there in the monitoring of social media and other investigative techniques.
For sure.
To try and learn where they may be going. So although it may end here in Ottawa, it may not end completely for us in the country.
Yeah, and I want to thank Mark Mendelson and Chris Lewis and Mubin Sheikh for being part of our coverage. Gentlemen, we may tap into your expertise in the hours ahead, depending how this plays out. But in the meantime, thank you on behalf of our team here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks. Cheers.
All right, well, it is 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 Pacific. Ongoing coverage throughout the day of this crisis going on in the Capitol as police try to take back the Capitol, so to speak, from the protesters. And at the heart of this, of course, a protest has gone on for 22 days and counting. Anyone who lives in Ottawa, works in Ottawa, knows this. Just an unprecedented situation in our capital, and Canada being covered around the world for this story. Many people shaking their heads, wondering, how can this happen in nice, kind, safe, quiet, tranquil Canada? And here we're seeing it playing out. A different part of our country's narrative. It is part of the story, of course, but perhaps one we don't see that often. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Joyce Napier knows that all too well. And it's interesting, Joyce, I want to get your sense here, if I can, about the way this has played out with Justin Trudeau, who, was called out by many people for a lack of leadership. What do you think is at stake here as we watch these images play out in the Capitol?
Well, it may be his political future. This police operation cannot fail. And I think Mark Mendelsohn was saying, look, they're going to stay, and they're going to stay as long as it takes. There will be another shift coming. So if this comes to a peaceful resolution, if the streets of Ottawa are finally free of these truckers and of this so-called, peaceful demonstration, well, then maybe the ratings will be good to him. Look, he invoked the Emergencies Act after the city did it, after the province did it, and then the federal government. The question will remain, and that debate still has to take place, was it really necessary, and why did it have to come to that? That is really a sledgehammer. That's what the leader of the official opposition called it. And indeed, it is a legal sledgehammer to invoke the Emergencies Act. Why did we have to get to this? Whose fault is it? Where was Justin Trudeau? He disappeared for a while. We couldn't see the Prime Minister. He did not address the nation. We know that the cities of Toronto and of Quebec City did really well when they had their trucker protests. Well, it's because they had the example of Ottawa. They knew what not to do. They knew not to let those trucks in. So why were the trucks let into Ottawa is certainly not the Prime Minister's responsibility. But once they were in, and once they were entrenched, and once they occupied this city, why was the Prime Minister, and why did he remain silent? And then on a Friday, he says, well, it won't be the first option, it won't be the second one, it may be the third. And then on Monday, it became the first option. So there are a lot of things we don't know. There's a big debate that will go on in the House of Commons, and it will be voted on, Todd. So it was supposed to continue today. It was suspended because it was deemed too dangerous for MPs to come to the House of Commons and cross the crowds that you're seeing on the screen. So it was postponed probably until Monday. Once it's safer, that conversation, and I'm calling it, and I'm being nice when I'm calling it a conversation, because the tension inside the House of Commons was palpable this week. The Speaker had to get up and tell them to stop name-calling. It was no longer the just order, but it was, some pretty nasty stuff flying, from one bench to the other. So there's a lot of tension on the streets. There's a lot of tensions at the political level. And, the Premier is in an election year as well, the Premier of Ontario. Will he wear this, or will Justin Trudeau end up by wearing this? That will be the big question. But for sure, the opposition, anyway, the Conservatives, hope that Justin Trudeau will wear it and are calling it Justin Trudeau's problem. History will tell. The official opposition leader said, the NDP, who is backing the Liberals on this Emergency Act, she told them, you will be on the wrong side of history. Well, I'm not sure who will be on the wrong or on the right side of history, because history is being written right now here in Ottawa, and we'll see who the winners are, and they are the ones who will write the history.
Our Bureau Chief in Ottawa, Joyce Napier. Good to see you, Joyce. Appreciate this. All right, let's go back to Evan Solomon, who is on the ground in the Capitol, get a sense of what's happening right now. Evan, I know it's very cold where you are, -20, give or take, with the wind chill. What can you tell us?
So, Todd, I've just, it's cold enough that your batteries keep dying. So I've just come in from that scene that you're looking at on the right. I just walked in from that confrontation where the line and the police and the protesters in front of the Chateau Laurier were there. And you know, you and I were speaking when I was there. It is very tense at the line. And as Mackenzie Gray, our producer there, reported, and we saw the woman getting carried away. There's a woman who was apparently pepper sprayed. She was carried literally right by us. We didn't see her get pepper sprayed, though. Mac did. So what's interesting to me is, as at this point, the operation from a policing point of view, now the protesters have a different view, but let's just talk about the different sides of the telescope. Police are saying this could not be going better from their point of view, and here's why. The leaders have been targeted and arrested. Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, Pat King, and others. They have managed to move trucks out. They have managed to move the line up towards Parliament Hill. They have cleared big major streets like Bank Street. That is cleared. And so to this moment, the operation has been, from a policing point of view, successful. There have been no major injuries. We have not had a major incident. There have been over 70 arrests, or now over 100 arrests that I understand, Todd, but not a major, quote, incident, okay? From the protesters' point of view, obviously this whole thing is an excessive use of force. But here's where it's tense. It is far from over now. As that line that our viewers are looking at, that I've just literally walked back from, is moving, the tension is going up, darkness is falling, and now the police have to figure out where they are going to hold the line. Are they going to keep moving throughout the night? Now, part of the question is, what is their objective tonight? They have now taken, now if you can see that shot behind the police there, to the, I guess, the east of the chateau, there had been a real encampment, a sector of trucks there. That is now no longer in control of the protesters. That's gone. The police control that line. The line has moved up. Then you've got this passel of folks here that you see this protest. Then just above them, so about towards the War Memorial, up towards Parliament Hill, Todd, there's another about 5 or 6 trucks, and then there's another little gap, and then you've got the main trucks and that soundstage at the main gates of Parliament Hill. So far, those are still very much protester controlled. And my question tonight is, how far are the police going to go tonight? Are they going to push this group up towards the War Memorial, move those trucks or take those trucks there, and then are they going to leave the main gates, which has been the symbolic center of this, Todd, the soundstage, the speeches go on there, the music is played there. That has been right in front of the Prime Minister's office, to the south and to the north, the Peace Tower. That has been the symbolic center. And the question is, as darkness is falling, will they try to take all that ground? They are moving methodically, but they are moving slowly. And we have seen children there. I literally, as I walk back to the studio here, Todd, I still am seeing people with their children. I don't know, and nor do police know, who's in the back of some of those trucks. And as Mark Mendelson so wisely pointed out, the cab of every one of those rigs, we don't know what's in there, and the police don't. How do they get in there? They smash the windows and they go in with tactical teams. We've seen that throughout the day. Are they going to do that at night? Are they going to try to take that main encampment? And if they do, then the symbolic center of the protest will be gone by the end of the day. But at this point, it's not. And they're still probably close to 500 meters of territory, let's call it, along Wellington, from the chateau all the way to West Block, about half a kilometer there, that is still very much in control of the protesters. And we'll find out as darkness falls if the police stop and contain, or they continue throughout the night. It is, I should say, a well-lit area, so it's not pitch black there. There's a lot of lighting in that area.
Evan Solomon at our bureau in Ottawa. He's been out and about all day, our eyes and ears, talking to the protesters, watching what police have been doing. Thank you for this, Evan. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, we just want to, draw your attention to a couple of things that Evan was talking about, the reaction of some of the protesters to police. So I'm going to read you a couple of things from the Ottawa Police Department. Just bear with me as I read it from my screen here. Protesters are assaulting officers, have attempted to remove officers' weapons. All means of de-escalation have been used to move forward in our goal of returning Ottawa to its normalcy. That tweet was sent out about an hour ago. I have two others to share with you. Here's another one from Ottawa Police. The protesters continued their assaultive behavior with the police line. To prevent an escalation or further injury, mounted officers were sent in to create critical space between the police line and protesters. This is done to create a safe distance. Mounted police officers on horseback, in other words, we believe they did come from the city of Toronto. One last one. As this was happening, a bicycle was thrown at the feet of one of the horses in an attempt to injure it. One person was arrested for intentionally harming a police service animal. And let me just show you, if we can go full frame here, to what we're seeing in front of the Chateau Laurier. As Evan was saying, very well lit, lots of street lights. You know that Chateau Laurier, of course, iconic hotel in our country. And the people are shouting shame, they're shouting freedom, they're angry at police. This has been the scene back and forth through much of the day. The change, though, earlier the protesters were at the intersection between Rideau and Sussex. They've now been pushed back closer to Parliament Hill. But a key point here, and I want to bring in Mike Lecouture, our senior political correspondent at News Channel. He's also nearby. He's on Parliament Hill. A key point here, Mike, is that at this point, you could argue many of the people that were able to be convinced to leave by police, that looked at those warnings and realized the end was coming, they've already gone. So what you're dealing with now is sort of the hardcore group, the people who say and have been saying, we're not going anywhere. And as they watch police, to a certain extent, it makes them even more angry, Mike.
Yeah, and it could make them even more difficult to remove at this point, because to your point, Todd, whoever has left already, and you know, I've been standing here all day witnessing upwards of 14 trucks leaving the area. You know, whoever does remain are more hardened, are the ones who are really believing that they deserve to be here and they should be here, and they will have to be removed forcefully, potentially. And I can tell you, you know, I'm just west of where Evan was talking about, that soundstage. It is just behind me, but there is a bit of a different tone. I'm hearing the drones of the horns now. That is something we did not hear all day. So clearly night has fallen, and it has taken on a bit of a different sense here and a bit of a different feeling. There's also a barrel fire that's just on the street down there. And, you know, talking about what Evan said, the number of children here, I'm seeing some children back in that play area playing with that larger Connect 4 toy. So it's really interesting, you know, when we talk about what the feeling is, because this far west isn't right up on that sort of line with the protesters and police officers, so it has been a little more relaxed. However, there is still that sort of resolve amongst these people digging in. This is, you know, O'Connor Street going towards the Supreme Court, or to Bank Street on Parliament Hill, just sort of right in front of the West Block where now Parliament sits. This is an area where there are so many cars and trucks that are bumper to bumper, tire to tire, and if they want to try and get out, it will be a jigsaw puzzle to try and get them out of here. We've seen some leave, but not tons.
No, and just so people at home and who are watching us from across Canada, Mike, who may not be familiar with Ottawa as you are, they're pushing them sort of in your direction, but you're still quite far away from where they are. But they're pushing them, we can see right now, they're trying to get them past the Chateau Laurier, closer to Parliament Hill.
Yeah, and getting them past Chateau Laurier and Parliament Hill into that area that Evan was talking about. If you get them past the National War Memorial, that's on Elgin, and that is also facing the Chateau Laurier. If you get them past that, then you start to get into that staging area, and then that's when it's going to start to push back and spill into where I am here, because you'll start to sort of feel that reverberation of people moving back. It's unclear whether or not the people here really sort of feel that type of heat, if I can put put it that way, that the police are that close. But the fact that the horns are still going so loud, it'll still actually, Todd, make it a more difficult situation, because from everything that I've been seeing, and yes, there have been trucks there, but more densely populated trucks behind me here on Wellington. And again, to give people that idea, you have Parliament Hill, and then the street right in front of it is Wellington. And those are where you've seen all of those images of the trucks parked side by side, tire to tire, packed in really tight. There is a bit more room here now to maneuver, and you have to wonder whether or not in the next few hours or after this, depending on what police want to do, as Evan was talking about, if they continue to move forward, will there be a move of some truckers to say, I'm out of here, this is it, I've had enough? Or do they do that tomorrow night if they realize that they've got one more night of this? It's really unclear and difficult to really know, because even if you try and talk to these truckers, many of them say, I'm staying for as long as I can and until the mandates are done and until Prime Minister Trudeau resigns. Some are a little more understanding about it, and they may finally realize that, look, it's either I leave now of my own accord or I leave now in handcuffs.
Mike Lukather is our senior political correspondent joining us from Parliament Hill. We'll talk soon, Mike. Thank you for the reporting, as always. We also want to bring in now Yasser Naqvi. He's the Liberal Member of Parliament who represents Ottawa Centre, which does include the parliamentary precinct that we're focusing on here. Mr. Naqvi, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate you coming on CTV News Channel right now. Your thoughts on what you're seeing in your riding?
Well, thanks, Todd. I mean, as you can watch, it's a very tense situation. We've had this occupation now go on for 3 weeks, which has been terrorizing for the community who live in. Right now, those who are not from Ottawa are probably just seeing Chateau Laurier, but they need to recognize that as soon as you get close to Parliament Hill, all of south of that neighborhood, there's residences, there are apartment buildings. People live there who've been suffering for last 3 weeks. I'm sad that this has come to this, that this protest did not finish early. And I'm hopeful that it will end peacefully.
This is day 22, and as you know, it's not over yet, Yasser, and there are people who are in your constituency and elsewhere in Ottawa who are saying, you know, how did it get to this point? Was this a failure of political leadership? I mean, you're the local MP, you're part of the Liberal government, you are obviously a citizen of Ottawa. A lot of people we spoke to say, you know, we felt that we were abandoned by our political leaders. People who live in Ottawa, let me be clear, they felt abandoned. Your thoughts?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of questions that will be asked, and there will be legitimate questions to be asked, because something like this should have not lasted for this long. But I can tell you, myself included, as a local member of Parliament, working very closely with the government and local municipality to make sure that all the resources are available to them to deal with this in a manner that's necessary. Politicians make the laws, but the enforcement is at the police level, and we're seeing that happen, play out all day today. Whether it should have happened earlier, what was the restrictions or causes for not happening, I'm sure we'll ask those questions. What's important is that this ends peacefully, and the people who live in those neighborhoods who've faced so much aggression towards them over the last 3 weeks, that they remain safe. That's my number one concern. And we're hopeful that this will come to an end as quickly as possible.
Another question for you. You know, do you think that there were mistakes made politically in the beginning of this, that maybe the Prime Minister or others should have gone out and spoken to some of these protesters, Yasser? And I appreciate that, there were some who were radicalized, and there were some who were promoting some very hateful ideologies. But, that really did seem to be a minority. We continue to talk to people who are part of this who say, we don't feel that we are being listened to. Should they have at least been granted a conversation, perhaps, with the government?
Well, the tone and tenor of this protest from the very beginning has been very difficult, to be honest with you. I mean, of course, we saw those very racist symbols like swastikas and Confederate flags, which was extremely hurtful to a lot of people in my community, and I'm sure across the country. Not to mention, the basis of this protest has been about overthrowing a democratically elected government, of doing it in a manner that's very subversive in nature. You don't have a conversation with people like this. Of course, some of them have legitimate concerns about ending, some of the mandates and the impact of the pandemic. But that point has been made. But this protest became an occupation. It was no longer an expression of ideas, and that has made it extremely difficult to resolve this in a way that would happen by dialogue.
Yasser Naqvi is the Liberal MP representing Ottawa Centre. Mr. Naqvi, I appreciate you taking the time. Very busy, but it's good to get your perspective here in our live coverage today.
Thank you very much, Todd.
Okay, good to get that voice as part of our programming here as we bring you nonstop coverage here throughout the day of what's happening in Ottawa. As I mentioned to the MP, this is day 22. It is not over, perhaps the beginning of the end, but clearly this is going to go well into the evening and into the weekend as well, because some of these hardcore supporters, some of these hardcore protesters are not going anywhere. We have been hearing from our correspondents, Evan Solomon, telling us more than 100 arrests have been made, but as you can see, there are still hundreds of people who seem determined to stay out there in Ottawa to get their message across, not only to the police and to the politicians, but to people watching right across Canada. And that's what you hear: freedom, 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 over and over again. We should also point out that it feels like about -20 right now in Ottawa, just to give you a sense. It has been cold all day. The sun went down about an hour ago. And so the question is, what are police going to do in the hours ahead to bring this to an end? Make no mistake, though, they've got hundreds and hundreds of officers from the Ottawa Police, but also reinforced by the RCMP, the Ontario Provincial Police Force, police from Toronto, police from Vancouver, police from Quebec. They're all there to try and reinforce Ottawa Police to bring this to a peaceful end. And by the way, it has largely been very peaceful. We want to point that out. A lot of restraint on the part of police. The protesters have also been largely peaceful, so we have not seen any violent confrontations, and we certainly hope that will not be the case. I want to bring in another voice from Ottawa, Zexi Lee, and she's become something of a champion for certainly people living in Ottawa over the past couple of weeks, because she was the one who brought that lawsuit against the convoy on behalf of Ottawa businesses and residents who saw their lives massively disrupted, of course, by the ongoing protests. And it's great to have you part of our coverage here. You're following this as well. Can I ask you what you think, Zexi, of what you're seeing?
I think that I'm grateful to see such a concerted effort to end this occupation and end it peacefully. I think it's very important that it does end peacefully. And I can only hope, like you said, that no significant force is required to end it.
Absolutely, and I know that as a result of your lawsuit, basically an injunction was brought in that stopped the honking, and that was a huge relief to a lot of people who couldn't sleep at night and were just, being disturbed over and over again by the big rigs that were honking incessantly. That injunction was extended recently as well. We are hearing honking back, but again, this could be the end game we're witnessing today and over the next couple of days, perhaps as well. Have you noticed a difference since you decided to take it upon yourself, to actually go to court and fight legally to try and bring this to an end? What have you seen? What have you heard?
So I think the biggest thing for me is for people to realize that those first 10 days was they were unbearable for every single, for the most part, most residents in Centretown. It was essentially constant noise torture. All day, all night, a lot of the time, and it was terrifying for a lot of people, knowing that we not only were not safe on our streets, but we weren't safe in our homes either. Now, obviously, things are a little bit more quiet. There are definitely bursts where the occupiers feel emboldened to honk again, and while it is almost never quite at the same scale, I think the trauma from those first 10 days exists within a lot of people still, and it's an unsettling thing to see. Versus the sound, I think the overall atmosphere for me personally, and as I've heard from a lot of other Centretown residents, the people that have decided to stay are, so they say, hardcore. These people are very difficult to reason with. They do not have any intentions of leaving, and I think we worry most about them because of their intensity, really. But I stay hopeful that it will end soon.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is unlike anything we've seen in Ottawa. And I lived in Ottawa when I was a kid growing up for a number of years, went to journalism school at Carleton, got a sister who lives there, very familiar with the capital. This is unprecedented, never seen anything like this, flies in the face of the image of Ottawa, and it's certainly getting a lot of coverage internationally for that reason as well. And yet these people say, look, this is the seat of federal power. That's where we're going to go to send our message because that's where we feel that we're going to get heard, and of course we're going to get coverage, and our voice is going to be finally able to kind of send the message that we feel we've not been able to send thus far. And this is what we're seeing playing out. And just to draw our attention for our viewers who are watching, we've got you, Zexi, in one part of the screen. The rest we're showing are live pictures coming in from Ottawa. Slight delay, but live pictures basically coming in from the capital of these kind of confrontations. And we see riot police there. You can see them in their helmets with their shield masks down as they're trying to convince people to leave, but they are definitely moving, Zexi, as we move forward here. They're moving people past the Chateau Laurier, trying to get them out of certain key areas of Ottawa and clear the areas. We had the MP on just before you, and I'm not sure if you were able to listen into anything of what he was saying, Yasser Naqvi, the Liberal MP that represents the riding you live in. I asked him about a failure of leadership, and I asked him about people such as yourself who basically felt abandoned in all of this. I mean, you're a champion for people in Ottawa because you said enough is enough. I'm not going to wait for my city councillor or my local MP or the police, frankly, to try and solve this. I'm going to go to court and do it myself. Tell me about that and what you make of the way this has been handled, let's say, by so-called, political leaders in the community.
I would definitely say I personally have observed a power vacuum. I think that there has definitely been a dereliction of duty on several levels, and ultimately the residents of Centertown were collateral damage as a result. I think a lot of the message has been lost where there are real people here that are being hurt because of what's going on. And regardless of how valid a message might be, the way you communicate it and the methodology you use speaks a lot. And what has happened in Ottawa has utterly delegitimized the intentions, perhaps, of what the occupiers are seeking. And at this point, I also agree with Yasser Naqvi that this is not something that you negotiate with when an entire city is being held hostage and people are demanding that they be heard. And literally every single day on the streets, if you complain, they tell you, make your MP listen to our demands if you want this to stop. That is not a negotiation. That is holding us hostage, and that is threatening us. And for a lot of people, they don't see it. But this is our reality, and we deserve to be heard, and we deserve accountability for the failures in leadership that caused this.
Zexi Lee joining us live here on CTV News Channel. She is heralded as something of a champion for a lot of people in Ottawa. She's the one who brought that initial lawsuit trying to stop the honking in the capital, and it did happen, and that injunction issued by a judge was extended as well, giving us her take today as we follow these arrests. Zexi, good to see you. I appreciate you taking time and being part of our coverage here at CTV News.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your coverage so very much.
All right. 100 people have been arrested so far. We're not sure the exact number, but it continues to go up basically by the hour as police are pulling people out of the crowd and arresting them. We know about 21 vehicles so far have been towed, and as we were talking to our correspondent Mike Lecouture throughout the day, a number of truck drivers have taken it upon themselves to leave and move their big rigs out. In fact, at one point, different snowbanks had been put out across different streets, perhaps to block police from moving in, and then we saw some of the protesters digging those snowbanks out and getting rid of them so trucks could actually leave. So what's happening here is now becoming pretty clear. There are a certain number of protesters who've decided to leave. They feel their message has been sent. They're not interested in getting arrested. They're not interested in facing punishing fines, perhaps having their commercial driver's licenses taken away from them. So they have decided to leave. But what we're watching, and these are the pictures we're bringing you, are a more hardcore group. The people who from almost day one have said, we're not interested in going anywhere. You can arrest us, you can fine us, you can take away our license. We're going to stay because in our mind, there is something at stake here that's far more important, as they see it, freedom from tyranny, the idea that they need to send a message to the federal government, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about Justin Trudeau himself. There are many different reasons why people are out in the streets. And we should point out, we don't want to delegitimize what's going on here. Some of these people feel very desperate. They're very angry. They've been going through the pandemic, as we all have been. And so that's the mindset here, and that's why you see so much anger. They feel, in some cases, they're completely shut out by the system, the establishment, the government, and yes, us in the media as well. A lot of anger, a lot of vitriol directed at us as well. Michael Kempa is my guest. He, too, is in Ottawa. He is with the University of Ottawa. He is with the Criminology Department. Michael, thank you for taking some time today. First of all, your sense of what you're seeing right now in your city.
Well, it's progressed much faster than I expected over the course of today. When the police came in this morning, it was very deliberate, step by step. But over the course of the day, they picked up a lot more pace. They've gotten to where I thought they would be tomorrow morning. The use of the horses, the mounted police, was very effective in pushing the crowd back when they began to surge a little bit there. That's something, as soon as we heard the deputy chief, Steve Bell, say that there would be tactics that Ottawans are not used to seeing from police, I had in mind probably horses, and we're now seeing police officers with gas masks. These are the types of things we've seen abroad, and they were expected here once we had that announcement from police.
And we keep hearing, Michael, you know, about how the timeline here is going to extend likely into the weekend, because there's sort of almost a case-by-case negotiation where police are trying to talk to different protesters, trying again to convince them. I mean, although, you know, the police have time and again throughout this, certainly in the last week, been extremely clear, crystal clear, beyond crystal clear about what lies in store if you do not clear out. This is an illegal occupation of the capital of Canada, and it's time to go. Your sense as to what we might see now, though, in terms of police trying to resolve this?
Well, what surprised me today was I had initially thought there were a very large number of people who had no awareness that they were breaking laws because they have been told by organizers of the convoy that they are not, some even being sworn in as imaginary police officers. And then I knew there was a hardcore contingent of people that I thought might be committed to violence at the very end. I'm not sure how big that contingent may be, but there was a much larger group of people that I noticed today that clearly understand what they are doing. They're turning themselves in for arrest. And I actually believe now, in looking at that, it has been their intention to take their fight through the court system. That was a surprise.
And one last question for you here, and I appreciate you following all of this closely. You know, when you hear about 100 arrests, your take on what we might see, because at one point, if people are not willing to clear out, and I've used the term, you know, hardcore group, these are sort of the entrenched people who don't seem to have any problem with being arrested. You know, how high you think those numbers will actually go? We're hearing them singing now, and they've been singing the national anthem as well.
It's going to get higher, and the pace of arrest will increase over the next day or two, because those who are leaving, those that the police can persuade, those numbers will diminish probably over the next day or so. More people will be charged the longer that they stay. Police will pick up the pace of laying charges.
Michael, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the program today, tap into your expertise as a criminologist at the University of Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
All right, we also have the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, who is standing by with his read on what we're seeing. Mr. Singh, always a pleasure to see you. I wish it was under better circumstances. Your thoughts on what we're seeing in Ottawa today?
Thanks so much. Yes, I wish it was under better circumstances as well. Well, what we're seeing is finally action after weeks and weeks of inaction and, frankly, a failure of leadership that's got us to this point. And that failure was really not recognizing the real threat of this convoy. And the problem with that is it was very brazenly posted on their website. They were clear about when they were coming. The convoy made it clear about their intentions. Despite all of that, all levels of government failed to respond with seriousness, and we are left to this crisis, and it's gotten worse and worse. But now we're seeing action, and we're seeing the occupation be dismantled. And this was an occupation, an insurrection. And though those sound like harsh words, those are their exact intentions. They intended to overthrow the government, replace it with a committee of their own choosing. They were intending to sow mayhem and discord and chaos, and that's exactly what they did.
You're saying a failure of leadership from the Prime Minister himself.
Absolutely. This is a nation's capital, and it was clear that they were intending to be here. It was clear that they had bad intentions, and that this was not a protest. This was an occupation, and they made it clear they're going to occupy Ottawa. So it should have never got to this. Right away, initially, in before they even arrived, there should have been coordination with local, municipal, and provincial police to say, listen, we need to stop this, and we need to stop this immediately. Protests are welcome, but a group that wants to overthrow the government, that wants to replace it with unelected officials, is not on. And then a group that wants to shut down the bridge, hurting thousands and thousands of workers, causing people to lose many, many hours of wages, many days of wages, and shutting down one of the busiest shopping centers in Rideau Centre, hurting thousands of workers there who've lost wages that they won't ever get back. This is something that could have been avoided, and the lack of leadership brought us this moment, but now we're seeing some action being taken, which is what we've long called for.
When this is over, and it will be over at one point, certainly given what we're seeing in terms of the deployment of law enforcement in Ottawa, and the capital is taken back, so to speak, Mr. Singh, I'm wondering what you think the number one lesson that we all need to take away here, regardless of political ideology, because this is something we have never seen in our country before. As you know, people watching around the world, they are stunned by what they're seeing in Canada. Your thoughts on the one thing we need to bear in mind as we move forward from this?
Well, I think there's a number of things. I think, one, we need to understand that when there's a serious threat to our democracy, we've got to take it seriously. Secondly, we've shown a great solidarity in this struggle against the pandemic, and that is the story of this pandemic, the solidarity. Thirdly, I think what this has shown is that there's serious problems with policing that take certain threats that are not very serious very seriously. Think about land defenders and racialized people, and they completely change their approach when it comes to this type of convoy and this occupation. That's going to require us to have a deep look at policing and the way it assesses people who are not a risk as a risk, and those who are risks as not something to be worried about, when in fact those are the folks that cause the most damage.
One last question for you regarding how the Conservative Party of Canada has dealt with this crisis. Your characterization?
They've inflamed this, sadly. They've inflamed this, and it was not a secret. Their email was leaked where their current interim leader said, let's make this a Trudeau problem. So they tried to score points off this, and they're going to pay the consequences of that. People are going to look at them as those who sought to undermine Canadian democracy. But in fairness, the Liberals also tried to score points off this. They wanted to let this be a moment for people to see how bad the Conservatives are. And instead of playing games about jurisdiction or trying to score political points, this should have been a moment where we came together to deal with the crisis. That's happening now, and I'm encouraged by it. But that's something we can learn from. Let's not make the overthrowing of our democracy a partisan issue. Let's not make healthcare and public health measures a partisan issue. These are important decisions we make to take care of each other, to lift each other up, and they should never have been made into political points.
Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the New Democrats, joining us with his take on what we're seeing in Ottawa. It's always good to have you part of our coverage again, hopefully next time under happier circumstances, Mr. Singh.
Thank you, sir.
All right, if you're just joining us, I just want to point out what we're watching here closely. These are live pictures coming in here on your screen from Ottawa. This is right near the Chateau Laurier. This is along Wellington and the Rideau Centre, not too far away. Let's just listen in for a moment here, if we can, to the crowd. Yeah, and this is what we hear time and time again. Freedom, freedom, freedom. These people believe that their freedom is being taken away from them by the Trudeau government, by pandemic measures. These are a hardcore group of people. Some of them have been there for the past 22 days in Ottawa. Think about that. Very cold tonight in the capital, about minus 20 degrees. They are out there. And it's difficult to see from the camera perspective, but our cameraman is showing you there in the background. You can see those helmets. That is police. Those are riot police. You can see the crowd is filming them as the police have slowed slowly but surely over the past 3 or 4 hours, give or take, started to move people closer and closer toward Parliament Hill. This is just a massive deployment, by the way, of police. It's not just Ottawa police. Remember, they had said that they felt they were overwhelmed by the situation. They asked for reinforcements. They did get them. So it's Ottawa police. It's also the RCMP. Ontario Provincial Police. It's also the Sûreté du Québec, which has sent about 250 officers in to help with what's going on. There are police from Toronto, police in the Greater Toronto Area, including Durham, just east of Toronto, in the Oshawa area, as well as police from as far away as Vancouver, all here to help Ottawa police end this. And end it they will. It's just a question of time, of course, because now they have decided they will start to make arrests. How many, you ask? It's a moving number. We can tell you more than 100 people have been arrested. About 21 vehicles have been towed. Some of the key organizers of this so-called Freedom Convoy have also been arrested, including Pat King and Tamara Leach. Those two, of course, key figures in all of this. They were arrested in the last 24 hours or so. In one case, charged with mischief, and other arrests are going on. So that brings you up to speed. We have been bringing you wall-to-wall coverage throughout the day and likely throughout the evening, of course, because the story doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon. It is a long weekend, we should point out as well, and police have cordoned off a big chunk of Ottawa to make sure no more demonstrators can come and join in so-called solidarity. One of the key things, and let's go back if we can by 21 days or so. It's hard, of course, to remember how this all began with that Freedom Convoy. Left British Columbia, headed to Ottawa, those big rig trucks getting support in different parts of the country, people on overpasses in Toronto with the flags in solidarity, and a lot of solidarity in other parts of Canada, arriving in the capital with the big rigs. They parked them in front of Parliament Hill and other parts of the city to send a message that they're not going anywhere, and of course honking the horns as well. How do you get the trucks out? That's a key question here. That involves tow trucks. That involves the towing industry, which itself is very divided over this issue. Ideologically, many tow truck drivers support what's going on. I want to bring in Mark Graves to the conversation. He is the president of the Provincial Towing Association of Ontario. Mark, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, and your thoughts here on what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, what we're seeing is a lot of people with voicing their opinions and working towards what they believe in to be correct, and then you've got the other side that's on the other side, and the reality here is the towing industry has been thrown into this because they announced that we were going to be compelled to do the work.
Yeah. And, can I just jump in here and just ask you about that, if I can, Mark, because I think that's something really important to point out. The initial action was that, okay, we're going to get tow truck drivers to come in here, and they're going to help us get rid of these these rigs, these big trucks. And then, of course, there was resistance on the part of some tow truck drivers, some in the industry, perhaps on political reasons. They actually support the convoy. They don't want to do it. Others may have been worried about their safety. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons here. But you're also pointing out that as a result of the Emergencies Act and some of these new laws that have been brought into place, tow truck operators are now compelled to do this. Can you explain what that means in practice?
Well, basically what they're saying is that they can tell any towing company to send their equipment and operators to do the work that's required. And
those operators don't have a choice, correct? They have to do it, otherwise they themselves will face penalties.
Well, yes, and we're still trying to get some clarification on that. We're looking for some written documentation of what we're being compelled to do, and then trying to get some legal opinions on what the rights are and things. If a company has one heavy truck and one heavy operator, do they have to send them and jeopardize the business that they do on a daily basis? Are they in contempt? The real issue here is we still don't know the scope of the work that they want done.
Right.
We don't know how many trucks need to be sent, how many operators need to be sent. We don't know when they want us there. We don't know how the cleanup is supposed to take place and under what conditions. So, we need answers, they've compelled us to do the work, but haven't given us a scope of work yet.
Yeah, a lot of good questions there. Can I ask you, just sort of based on what you're seeing, when you've got, hundreds of trucks, these are big rigs, and I'm curious, what that looks like, Mark, operationally, to actually go in and start getting them out. And as you know, it's not just, they're not parked sort of right there, you grab them, you tow them, you get them out. In some cases, they have been sort of strategically parked in a way to make it very difficult to get them out of there. So what does that look like, potentially, if it comes to that?
Well, anything's possible. This is going to take a coordinated effort between industry professionals and police and whatever groups are on the ground in control of the situation that are going on. Anything can be done. It's what type of resistance are we going to face as it's being done? Are we going to wait until all of the protesters are cleaned out and then move the trucks? Where are the trucks? How are they going to be towed? We have far more questions than we have answers, and they're saying we have to do it, but they haven't said what we have to do yet.
Hey, Mark, I appreciate you part of our coverage here. A lot of moving parts, and it's great to have you with us today.
Great. Thank you.
Mark Graves is the president of the Provincial Towing Association. We spoke to another representative, too, of the industry earlier today who said one of the issues, he himself is in support of the Freedom Convoy, and one of the issues is that a lot of these tow truck drivers, he claimed clear majority of them are actually in favor of these protests, and so they do not want to take part in removing the trucks, which is just an added level of complication to an already very complex story. Let's go back to our own Mike Lecouture, senior political correspondent, who has been outside throughout the day. He's now back inside, a little bit warmer, Mike, of course, where you are after dealing with minus 20 degrees for hours and hours. Good to see you. Yeah, a little bit. I can appreciate what it was like being out there. Your thoughts here, because, now it's nighttime and the police are still moving in. There's this sort of back and forth yelling going on and jostling going on right there on sort of the intersection between Wellington and Sussex and Rideau. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and just interesting because this really is an intersection that kind of has three parts to it. People need to understand that the Chateau Laurier is right next to the Senate of Canada, so it's on Wellington Street, but then it's sort of facing the Chateau is the National War Memorial. It's a big, wide open space. Trying to sort of continue to creep in there and to regain control of that would be a very difficult thing to do because of how many different routes there could be out of there for protesters to try and escape. So to see this sort of face-off right there is really interesting, and really think about the symbolism of this as well, is that right in front of the Senate of Canada, which is one of the houses of government, that this is the type of thing that is happening. That Senate building is actually also an old convention center, and that is where a number of some of the constitutional talks had been happening many years ago. So if anybody wants to sort of dig into the symbolism of this, to have the National War Memorial there, the Chateau Laurier, which is one of the sort of icons of Ottawa, and of course Wellington Street as well, and add to that old convention center, and now the Senate building is where it's sitting there. It's just interesting that this new dynamic that happens at night, which is people feel a little more emboldened, they feel a little more bold, and clearly feeling like they can face off with police. Just in my walk back from Parliament Hill, noticing that there's still quite a few people downtown. I saw at least one child there. Again, I hate to continue to harp on this, but it continues to be illegal to bring your children down to this protest, according to the Emergencies Act, which is in effect right now, but people still believe that this is a place for children somehow when you see sites like this, because what we're seeing there is maybe about 750 meters, maximum a kilometer from where I was on Parliament Hill. And it's just interesting that people still sort of feel like they can just walk freely about. And as I'd mentioned earlier in a couple other hits, there's a big oil drum that is right at the top of O'Connor and Wellington. People have lit a fire in there. They're warming themselves by it as the temperatures continue to dip outside. So maybe the resolve continues to be there, even even though, as I've been reporting throughout the day, that the number of trucks has been dwindling. I counted at least 14 trucks that have left in the last 24 hours, or at least in the last 12 hours from there. And interesting to see how that'll affect people, how that affects morale when they realize that they don't have so many people to stand shoulder to shoulder there with when police start to face off with them. But clearly in the images that we're seeing right now, Todd, people are feeling emboldened still, and they still feel like they can face off with police.
Our senior political correspondent here at CTV News Channel, Mike Lecouture, who's been outside almost the entire day, reporting, doing some excellent coverage here. Mike, thank you for this. Very cold in Ottawa. Mike now back in the studio, fortunately, no doubt warming up, rightly so. Let's bring in Calvin Lawrence to the conversation. Calvin is a former member of the RCMP. Calvin, good to see you, and I appreciate you coming back on the program here as we continue our coverage. You know, we were talking a little bit about nighttime and how that changes the equation here, and now we're still looking at this back and forth between police and protesters. What do you think we might see in the hours ahead?
Well, because it is dark and because there are some people around that feel they might be able to do something, maybe sabotage something here and there, they may try it. But you have to remember, too, that you're looking at people who are standing there, protesters who don't have shifts. Police officers have shifts. Police officers are going to get warm. Police officers are going to get fed. Police officers are going to go to the washrooms. The people standing there, the longer they stand there, the colder it's going to get. So the weather itself is going to be a deterrent to some degree.
And we've talked about more than 100 arrests. No doubt we're going to see a lot more in the hours and days ahead. Can you give me any sense, based on your operational experience and expertise, you know, how long it might take, Calvin, for this area to be cleared out of the protesters? And I appreciate it's going to take a lot longer to get the trucks out. That's a whole other side of this equation. But the actual protesters themselves.
Well, there's two ways the police can do things. They can go in with tear gas. They can go in with the emergency response people with their suits and whatever. Or you can go in the way that they're doing it now, which I feel is the right way. They're inching their way through the protesters and getting things done the way that they want to do them at their own time, at their own speed. This is no different than if you're dealing with an individual. You want the individual so traumatized that he'll do whatever you want, or you want them so calm that he'll do whatever you want. So they're using the calm approach. They're negotiating. They're talking. But at the end of the day, they'll make an arrest. And I think that's the proper way to do it, what they're doing now.
And we have seen a lot of calm scenes throughout the day. Things are getting a little more heated, as our correspondent Mike Lecouture was saying. You know, once night falls, people might feel a little more emboldened to act. There could be liquid courage in the form of alcohol. We don't know. People are exhausted. They're cold. It's very, very, very cold in the capital, and they get angry when they see police moving in, and so you get sort of a bit of a heated environment and atmosphere playing out in the streets as well, Calvin.
Well, they have to know now that in front of them is a police officer that's going to take action if they're given lawful, if the protesters are giving lawful orders to disband or to go in a certain direction. They have to know it's right there. It's going to happen immediately. There's no more discussion, and they're going to get cuffed and taken away. And so now they have to make a decision on what they want to do.
How do you think this is going to play out in the next couple of days?
Well, I think that so far, if they keep doing what they're doing, everything is going to going to be fine. But if there's some hardcore people there that want to get violent, they may take it up a notch. So hopefully they don't. But if they do, then that's what they have to do. Once you start something like this, you have to keep going. And where it goes, it just goes. But now it's up to the demonstrators. It's not up to the police. The police are acting in a rational manner. So they have to react to what the demonstrators do.
Calvin, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the program, lend us your expertise with the time you served in the RCMP, and giving us your sense of what you think might happen now in the capital in the hours and days ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and that is going to do it for me. I'm Todd Vanderheyden. Stay with us, though, for ongoing coverage right here on CTV News Channel. As we're coming up on 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, we're going to bring you the very latest. CTV's Jennifer Burke is standing by to get in the chair. Hundreds of police officers moving in on the protesters who remain in the downtown core of Ottawa. They have made more than 100 arrests so far, including some of the leaders of the Freedom Convoy, including Pat King, Tamara Leach as well. We have our reporters out on the ground. We're getting the very latest on how this is all going to play out in the hours ahead. Certainly there's a lot more action. It's a long weekend, and the protesters, certainly the ones you're seeing on your screen right now, are entrenched. They're angry. They're shouting at police. They say they are not going anywhere, and they don't mind being arrested or fined. So the question is, how does this play out by police in the hours ahead and over the weekend, no doubt. All right, we're going to hand things over to Jennifer Burke. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Is happening inside the vehicle. So again, when police move, they move very quickly, and then they halt. They've moved up about 10 meters, and it's interesting that they actually are putting what appear to be nail beds into the vehicles to ensure that if someone starts to drive, that all of their wheels will be blown out. Hard to see on our camera just because of the snow and all the activity, but it's the RCMP tactical team that is moving through. It's actually quite something. They're not able to get into this window of this particular vehicle, but I think they've gone in through the other side by the looks of it, Hannah.
David, let me give you a chance to catch your breath for a second. We'll keep your shot up. Tell Osama he's doing a wonderful job down there. We are appreciating all your work. Let me bring in Murray Faulkner to kind of talk us through what he thinks is happening on the ground right now. Murray.
Well, first of all, as the police take more ground and they move the protesters past vehicles, the police have to take control of the vehicles to ensure that A, there's no one in there, and B, if there is someone in there, they need to arrest them. If the vehicle's locked, it makes no sense to me why you would have a $300,000 rig and you want to let the windows get smashed. Leave the vehicle unlocked at least. And so this is what's going to happen as they keep moving forward. Any vehicle in their way, they will secure that vehicle to ensure it can't be moved. So whether a spike belt is laid down or another means to stop the vehicle. I will say that the windows of vehicles, the easiest window to smash is the passenger rear windows, because usually they're not double laminated. So as you can see, there was some difficulty in smashing the driver's window, because obviously that has a double laminated glass window with a plastic material in between the two windows.
Things I didn't know.
Well, so obviously the police will methodically keep moving. How does this get resolved, Hannah? The point is, all these people are going to have to be arrested. The police aren't just going to allow them to keep standing by and being pushed back. Eventually, mass arrests will have to happen if they continue to congregate in this area.
Okay, Murray Faulkner, hopefully you can stick around. We are going to go now to Thomas Degg, who's over at the War Memorial, where police have, it looks like, surrounded some of the people who have continued to stay in that location. Thomas, bring us up to date over there.
Yeah, in the past few minutes, protesters have been kneeling near here by the War Memorial as protesters have been pushed back by police in this operation to clear the entire area around Wellington, around Parliament Hill. Police have, in the past minute, repeatedely told them, look, this is going to be a secured area. You need to move back, pay your respects if you'd like, but we're even here at the War Memorial. We're being jeered and insulted. But that's a sidebar here as police try to continue to clear this area, which is, I think, probably a couple hundred meters from where David Common has been reporting this morning. This is, again, a very delicate operation. Police very mindful of not just of what they're doing on the ground, but how it looks. Many of these protesters very active on social media, very aware of what is shared on social media, and police want to be very mindful of the image that they are projecting by arresting protesters who have been simply the past couple minutes kneeling around the War Memorial. I should say, they have been given several warnings over the past couple of days that they have to leave the area, and we are being told to leave. This man who is talking to us is not in a position of authority here. He's a protester here, even though he's presenting himself as in a position of someone in a position of authority. That's what we're
Okay,
at.
Thomas, I want you to get to a safe location.
You have to live. Leave.
As we watch what's happening down at the National War Memorial. Let's bring in Murray Faulkner again. In this instance, we're seeing that there are protesters who are trying to just take over what's happening with police there. I don't know if we want to bring up the sound, but we can show, because I think there's a lot of vulgar language that's happening. The police are pushing them away from there. Let's put those pictures up. And Murray, can you talk about what we're seeing down at the War Memorial?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have the sound on down there, because you're not going to hear anything that should be heard on TV. It's a bit sad to see those dressed in military attire, wearing medals that they gained in the military, to protest in an area that honors the military and those that gave their life. This is not an area in which they should be standing their ground on, and honestly, it's sad to see.
Yeah, it really is. This has been a place where we saw in the first week someone dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. We saw protesters parking on the National War Memorial, this sacred ground, and then fences went up. And then a week later, we saw them take those fences down. It seems now police are clearing those people out of there. But again, these people have even camped out there. We saw police earlier going into that encampment on the National War Memorial. Now we're looking again, Mr. Faulkner, over to Wellington Street. It seems police continue to advance in that location as well. Just bring us up to speed as to what you feel is happening now at this location. It has moved extremely fast, much faster than we saw the process happening yesterday.
Right. Well, they're now in a very tight area. Tight because of the buildings to the left, the fenced area to the right, and now there are large vehicles in the way. So this is an area that you will see them not move as fast because it's a little more treacherous to get around. Let me just go back to the War Memorial. I had the honor of being an honorary colonel for 7 years for a service battalion, 31 Service Battalion, and I will say that the military that we have in this country is astounding. They're very professional, and it kind of reflects. I don't want the public to think that this is the thought of the Canadian military, because it's not. Mm-hmm. It is just a few people that wear the clothes that they were given while they were honoring our country, but this does not reflect the Canadian military.
No, I would have to agree with you. I go down there every year to cover the National Remembrance Day service, and from veterans I've heard from, they're not pleased with what they're seeing happen at the National War Memorial. It is now, though, being the police are now clearing that area out. I now want to bring in, if you can stick around for us as well, Mr. Faulkner, I want to bring in Charles Bordelot. He's a former chief of police here in Ottawa, and I want to get your thoughts on what you're seeing happening this morning.
Well, good morning, Hannah, and morning, Murray. Good to see you. What I've obviously seen this morning is a change of tactics. Because of the crowd behavior yesterday, the commanders did go back and revisit their plans, and certainly the equipment being used at the front line has totally changed, and they were moving back a little more aggressively with the demonstrators that have chosen to remain here. I also noticed the change in the language around that you may be arrested to you will be arrested, although they are still giving that last opportunity for individuals to leave and giving them access to leave the perimeter. Those, I think, we're probably going to see more arrests today, and unfortunately, probably some more aggressive behavior on the demonstrator side, which will require the police to take a more aggressive posture around arresting those individuals who have chosen to remain.
Mr. Bordelot, I want to ask you, we did see when the police started moving in, there was some type of device that was set off by one of the protesters, and moments later, we heard from Ottawa police. We told you, we gave you time to leave. We were slow and methodical, yet you were assaultive and aggressive with officers and the horses. Based on your behavior, responding by including helmets, batons for our safety. And then they also said the smoke you saw was not caused by police, but by protesters. How important is it to get these messages across concisely and quickly?
It's clear that from the police perspective, and they've learned over the years that the use of social media is a positive way to get the message out, because they know a number of these demonstrators are monitoring and listening to social media. However, those on the front line really aren't monitoring it. So that's why they're at the scene. They are using verbal language, verbal commands to leave the area or you'll be arrested. So they continue to communicate that message on the ground, as well as in social media. And I think it's also a lesson learned from the past as to the mystery around how things are taking place. The Ottawa Police Service is making use of social media to inform the public as to what they're actually seeing, because you have many cameras that are out there. You have the example of the horses yesterday reported by Fox killing a woman, and right away they clarified that message out. So they're trying to be the trusted source of information to give the right information to the public so that they better understand what is actually taking place on the ground as a result of the visuals that they're seeing from multiple sources.
Now, let me situate what's happening right now, and then I want to come back to you, Mr. Bordelot, as well. If we can show our multi-screen so that we can show you where police have landed now. In one location, I'm trying to see this shot that we're looking at currently. I think this is a shot of the police in front of the Parliament buildings. There is a car. Yes, this is in front of the Parliament buildings. This is, in fact, where the main stage was set up for the protesters. They had, in fact, even music there quite frequently. There are cars that seem to be left there. We see that the police line is not too far away. It's between the Parliament buildings and between Parliament buildings and the Prime Minister's office. Mr. Bordelot, I'll get to you in just one second, but I want to go now to our reporter on the ground who's at that location by the Prime Minister's office in Parliament Hill, David Common. Tell me what you're seeing from your vantage point now.
Yeah, and just to situate you, you say that this is literally the Prime Minister's office building right here. His windows look out, if he was there, at what is happening right now. Inside there, this first line RCMP officers, batons deployed. Further to the left, Ottawa police, also with batons out, face shields down on their helmets, and they have been continually advancing. They move very quickly, about 10 meters, and then stop for a certain amount of time, and then move again. What changes the dynamic now is it is not an open space anymore. They're now in between the fence line at Parliament and the Prime Minister's building. And if I come over here, is totally different. The landscape that they're going into, it's going into the trucks. And in those trucks, that is where they're going to have difficulty in actually getting into those areas. When we have seen when we've seen the police officers moving forward, they have continued to smash windows on the vehicles, looking inside, tactical officers looking inside at what's happening. I will say that the crowd, although now contained in the smaller area, also appears to have grown, because we know people are able to come in. They're not supposed to be. This is supposed to be a no-go zone, but there are ways to get in, and some people are sleeping in trucks or campers or their cars or hotels. And so those numbers have sort of reinforced likely calls going out on social media telling people to come to try to hold the line. But I'll tell you, that line now is malleable. It is on the move and likely to move again, and it will become much more unpredictable as and if they move into this line of trucks, because you can see there they can't get their tactical vehicles in there. They can't get police vehicles easily into there. It's going to be going truck by truck by truck. The police do have significant numbers today to be able to do that. Hundreds and hundreds of officers in this line and in behind from multiple police agencies, Hannah.
Okay, thank you, David Common. Mr. Bordelot, I want to bring you on about what David Common was talking about there, about the fact that there are these big, massive vehicles. I was talking to police on the ground yesterday. They have been involved in many different types of protests in this country, and they have a lot of experience. And one of the things they were telling me is they didn't have a protest that they could look back on and say, we have had to deal with these types of massive vehicles blocking roads. What type of issues does that put forward for the police on the ground?
Yeah, there's no question. In my 35 years of policing, and 7 of those as chief of police in Ottawa, and there's hundreds of demonstrations a year that take place in our nation's capital, nothing to the extent of having vehicles block and impede traffic for this amount of time, and also the behaviors of the demonstrators going out into the community and harassing, intimidating, and threatening. So as you saw this morning, they were able to advance quite rapidly and gain some ground because of there wasn't any equipment left. So they moved that up quickly now, but once they start hitting vehicles, safety is obviously a concern. So they will methodically approach each vehicle, smash the windows, gain access to it, clear it of people, and also any potential devices that may cause them harm. So that's why you see those tactical officers in there to make sure that those vehicles are safe. So then they'll progress. Then they'll continue progressing slowly, and you see them move all together. That's because all those officers are equipped with radios in their ears, and they are told exactly how far to move and when to move and what to do.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have 2 former chiefs of police with us. We also have Murray Faulkner, who is the former chief of police for London, Ontario. I want to bring you in on this discussion too. Just help us understand how they decide to move and when they decide to move. We see, and I'm trying to see what type of vehicle this is. I'm not sure if you can see it, Mr. Faulkner, in the video. Some type of, I really have problems seeing it at this point.
That's if what you're seeing is what I'm seeing. It's just a tactical vehicle being placed in position. Let me make a comment about social media and how important it is. It is important, but I don't want to downplay the importance of your network and other national networks that are covering this live. You know, many of these events that happen with policing and protests, the media isn't there to cover it 24/7 like you're covering it. You have a book now written about how public order units work, how professional police services work, and the public can see what police have to put up with in these massive demonstrations. And so, you know, when it comes time to dissect what goes on, your footage will be helped greatly in police tactics and in explaining to those that want to critique the events how important it is to have your type of coverage.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be lots of time for critiquing after in this whole scenario that has been going on for now the 4th weekend in the nation's capital. I want to bring in again our colleague Thomas Degg, who is down by the National War Memorial. They have seemed to have moved the protesters now off that site. Thomas, tell us what the latest is from there.
Yeah, the push has paused here from police. They have cleared protesters away from the National War Memorial, and several of them are just kind of standing around harassing the media who are here to document this moment. But if you may have seen in the pictures over the past half an hour or so, some of the protesters who were camped out here at the National War Memorial were dressed in military gear or camouflage and presenting themselves as military veterans. That may be the case, and they wanted to present themselves as peaceful protesters, and that may be the case, but the fact remains that police and officials had declared this an illegal protest, and everyone had been encouraged more and more forcefully over the past couple of days to vacate the area. And that's what police told them as they were pushed back. You can't be here anymore. This is a secured zone. And despite what they said about staying peaceful, we've heard this from protesters again and again over recent days, the fact remains that this was illegal, and police decided to take action a bit more aggressively this morning.
Okay, Thomas, I want you to get to a safe location. We do have security around you, so just make sure you stay in a safe place. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Thank you for your reporting on the ground there. I want to show people in our top corner. Mr. Bordelot, may I bring you in again on this? This is the mounted unit that is coming in now. Just break it down as to, when we start to see, these units come in as well. What type of indication is that giving you?
Well, they're a support unit, and that's the Toronto Police Service supporting the Ottawa Police Service and RCP and OPP in this operation. There's two purposes. One, it's a very strong signal to the demonstrators as to the police services are serious around this, to leave and to move out of that restricted area. And as we saw yesterday, the horses can be used when the crowd starts to get very unruly and the officers on the front line need that extra support. The horses will be used to move and break through the crowd in order to try to move them and break them up in a more rapid fashion.
And as we can see, and I'm not sure if you're seeing it, Mr. Bordelot, there was an offender being taken away at that point, being arrested clearly, being put into one of the police vehicles to be put away. There we go. We see that shot again. They're lined up, clearly, expecting to have multiple arrests today. Police are warning people who are in this protest again to leave immediately. You clearly see there are no more second chances here. Mr. Bordelot, when it comes to people who remain in these situations for this length of time, is there another chance for them to get out, or is it essentially that they now are going to be arrested?
They will always have the opportunity to leave. And that's a lesson learned, I think, from the G20 when they used the kettling technique that people couldn't physically leave. So they will give every last opportunity for an individual to have an escape route, to leave the area. However, I think you're down to a core group of individuals here who will not leave. So I would suspect that a good large percentage of these individuals that we see on the ground are most likely going to be arrested and given home in that transportation van and taken to the police station at some point in time today.
Like I was saying earlier, I'm very fortunate to be joined by two former chiefs of police, Charles Bordelot from Ottawa, former chief of police in Ottawa, also Murray Faulkner. He's a former London, Ontario chief of police. Mr. Faulkner, I want to bring you in on the thoughts of, what we're seeing now.
Well, what you're seeing is more resources from the police that have been held back. A different strategy than yesterday, that's for sure. But again, it's a different geographical area than yesterday. And so today, the protesters are the ones that are the hardcore dug in, aren't going to listen to anybody, and therefore, as Chief Bordelot said, will have to be eventually arrested. The offender vehicles are in place. The staff is ready. Mounted unit is there. I mean, you've got pretty well all the resources available, except for, I would hate to say, a large number of K9 units, and we hope we don't need to see that yet.
Yeah, and just in talking about this, is this clearly a sign, and I'll probably ask you, Mr. Faulkner, as well as Mr. Bordelot, is this clearly a sign that this is going to be the day where they really clear out this well-entrenched Wellington area? Mr. Faulkner, can I start with you?
Sure. I think today's the day that different tactics have been used. We've seen that this morning, and whether they can make those arrests or whether they want to make those arrests. I've used the term, this is the kindler, gentler policing in Canada. We certainly wouldn't necessarily see this in the United States. Look at what happened January the 6th. They call in the National Guard. We here, although it took 22 days to get enough police officers to do this, in our country, this is how we handle it. And it's a different way of policing. Paris had a demonstration 2 weeks ago, and there was no vehicles. It was just protesters standing around, and they just lobbed tear gas in to disperse it. That's not what I think our public wants. That's not what politicians want. And therefore, you're seeing a reflection in police activity today.
Mr. Bordelot, let me get your thoughts on that. Once they do get this area cleared out, it looks like, and this is just my impression, that they will try to get this very entrenched area of Wellington Street cleared today. Do you agree with that? And then I want to ask you as well, what will it look like after that for a while?
So police will never give you a timeline as to saying we will clear this area today. That's not the way they set their objectives. So clearly today they want to make an impact and a difference in that core area and try to clear as many as possible. But what happens if they say we're going to clear this by 4 o'clock, this puts enormous pressure on the front line, and that makes them go quicker. And that's when mistakes happen. So they're being very deliberate, very cautious in moving things step by step. And you will never see them go in en masse and start arresting people by the dozens at the same time. That's not the way these operations work. They will continue to move forward, make arrests 1 or 2 at a time, and then pause, secure the area, and then continue moving. So that's the approach in policing in Canada, and I think it's been successful to date in keeping everybody safe as possible, especially those frontline officers who have a very difficult job to do. I'm sure they're tired, they're exhausted, and they're cold, but they understand the importance of doing this for Ottawa, and they understand the significance of all eyes are watching them across the world. And I think it's an opportunity to show the professionalism and how policing in Canada should work when we're faced with this type of crisis.
Absolutely. And one of the things, these are officers from right across Canada. I know there are even officers, someone tweeted me from Edmonton saying that they sent officers here as well. So this is an example of what police can do right across this country. You're absolutely right, Mr. Bordelot.
Absolutely. And Vancouver's here as well. And I think police services across Canada and chiefs of police across this country are a tight-knit group of people. They support each other. They understand what Ottawa has gone through, and they've done what they can in order to support the operations in Ottawa, knowing very full well that they may have issues popping up in their own communities. So it's quite the commitment and a show of support when you have chiefs across this country and commissioners supporting the nation's capital in putting an end to this illegal occupation.
Okay, I want to go to our reporter, one of our reporters on the ground, David Common. I can see you there waving. Yeah, David, tell me where you are now and what's the feel?
Yeah, so you'll hear people around me singing "Oh Canada." They were chanting freedom a short time ago, and this is just meters away from public order police who, have been in that position for about 10 or 15 minutes now. The question is, what is coming next? We know that as they move into the large line of trucks, and if they do that, that they are likely to continue doing what they have been doing, and that is smashing windows on trucks, the police going in and looking if there's anything inside there that can cause harm to them. But you see that the crowd sort of swells, it ebbs and flows. As the police move forward, they rush back and then come back forward when the police stop. The police have been moving about 10 meters at a time. We saw, and I'm losing track of time, frankly, but maybe about an hour ago, a very large bang. That was, we believe, a police flashbang grenade, just something to disorient people and distract. They use it as they move forward. So not seeing any arrests at this point, but you see communications from the Ottawa police saying that we gave you the time to leave, we gave you the space to leave, you didn't leave, and now we are responding with batons and helmets. That tweet and other communiques coming out from the Ottawa police just a short time ago. Ottawa police are there in that front line of police officers. I can see a number of drones overhead, and they're large enough that they are quite likely police drones. We saw the Toronto police here yesterday with one of their drones, saw the RCMP launching their drones, and they do that to give officers a sense of what they might be walking into, and also watch for specific individuals in that crowd. You see the tactical vehicles that are in there, RCMP and Ottawa police, and people continue to pour in here. I am still seeing people walking up from what is a much quieter part of downtown, down the street, and they are joining this protest, perhaps called out by others on social media, texts going out to try to respond to what is happening this morning. Very large numbers of police, much larger than we have seen all at once in a single operation in some time.
Yeah, David, and it seemed like, and I think you were down there too, that the police moved much faster today in advancing forward than in yesterday's advancement.
Yes, certainly. When they move, it is very, very quick. And when you look at the time intervals, they have moved about every 10 minutes, except for now. Now they have stopped, and it may be because of what they're going into, a much denser environment if they continue their advance. It may be waiting for additional reinforcements. It's entirely possible other officers will come from behind or from the side. And so we continue to watch for that. But there are, you can see quite plainly, large numbers of protesters here, hundreds of them, and people in some cases who have been here for 3 weeks, others who have just joined, as we have seen surges over weekends. Typically, it may just be people coming in on the weekend again, as we have seen. Like last weekend, there were 4,000 or 5,000 people in place on these streets. I don't know that the numbers are at that. Frankly, I don't have visibility beyond this area that I'm in, but it does seem to be a smaller crowd, but still a very significant crowd.
Yeah, let me situate where you are, David, for viewers. Now, in that location, that is where the main stage was for the protesters at time, and I think that's one of the screens that they used.
Hannah.
Yeah,
it's right next. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. There's other ones up there now.
We're just
that's all I was going to say, Hannah. Just to say, yes, absolutely, you're quite right. The stage is still there, and the big boom crane with the Canadian flag still in place. But it is now, the back of that truck, all of about 6 meters away from the police front line. Okay, they appear to be moving again. There we go, Hannah. So You're going to see, as we usually see, the police move forward, and there is pushing going on with the crowd. Okay, there was a boom, and I don't know what that boom was from, but they are continuing to push, and we're just going to monitor where we're at. We may have to move from our position, but let's just try to stay where we are right now. As much as you see that, but those batons out, I'm not seeing them swinging. I'm not seeing contact other than them being used to push people.
David.
Okay.
We got to back up.
Yeah, we're going to have to just move here, Hannah. So we'll continue staying live, but we're going to back up off of the ground that we're on.
Okay, David,
and we're just going to back up from this ground, but you do see, I'll throw it back to you here, Hannah.
10 feet out.
Okay, David, I want you to stay safe. I'm going to bring in Charles Bordelot. He's a former chief of police for Ottawa, and let's just talk about what you're seeing happen right now. We heard David talking about the fact that the drones were in the air, and police seem to be using those batons not to hit, but to push.
Certainly, those are drones. Ottawa Police do have a number of drones, and what's happening there is they're piping in the video to the command post, where commanders are looking at an overall view of the crowd, the dynamics that are taking place, and that helps them inform their strategy with respect to how it's working and what they need to do next. So it's a great tool. I think we used to use helicopters or planes, but now the availability of drones is certainly makes that process a lot quicker and clearer images, and mobility as well between streets, and they can fly very low. What you're using as well, you're seeing as far as the use of the batons, that's as opposed to using your hands and your fists to push people back. It's a nice tool to have in order to have, for your safety, have that device just to push people back, and you may see them jabbing a bit just to send the message you need to push back. And I haven't seen the shields yet come out, but that's another safety piece. That's another tool that they can use to push the crowd back. But obviously they're going with the batons at this point in time for a safety reason from the officer's perspective.
Mr. Faulkner, Murray Faulkner, a former London, Ontario Chief of Police, I want to bring you into this discussion as well. When you see now they're again moving forward and advancing, we heard from David saying that there was a little bit more of time in between from the first advancement to then. Fill us in on what's happening and for this procedure right now.
Well, it's a couple of things. First of all, when the police lines stop, it's for two reasons. One is so that the officers on the front line can catch their breath, regroup. Another reason is for the command team behind that front line to assess next move. And thirdly, it's for the command center and those commanders in there to come up possibly with a different tactic and a different location in which they want to push the lines back. So it's not that the police can't keep moving forward. It's all in incremental steps that's planned out, very methodical. One of the things I want to say is that for the Ottawa citizens that are watching now, understand that this will come to an end eventually, but you will see a greater presence of police in and around the Parliament buildings for some time. We know, living in southwestern Ontario with the Ambassador Bridge and Blue Water Bridge, that this is a very susceptible point for protesters. And I know firsthand that there still is a number of police agencies in and around those municipalities to ensure that there's no more blockades. And downtown Ottawa will happen the same thing, I am sure.
Okay, let me go back to our colleague David Common on the ground. I think it looks... David, can you talk or...?
Yeah, we can talk. We can talk. We're going to have to pull out this way.
Okay,
we're okay. We're just going to stay right here for right now. Yeah, we're okay. We're okay. You see that officers have moved in. Their perimeter continues to expand, and they're taking over areas that have been used sort of as a soup kitchen, other areas. These are Ontario Provincial Police officers. We're going to have to move out of this area, Hannah, but I'll continue to talking as we do so. You can see at the front line, and Osama, you're going downstairs. Going downstairs.
It's all good, guys. It's okay.
And, I will just note that we have officers here from Durham Regional Police, that's in the Greater Toronto Area, Ontario Provincial Police. We're going to have to give you a little Betsy here as we go over a file.
Let the ladies.
Okay, just stay safe. Do you need to have a break there, David?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. You're okay.
Okay, this is down. Let me just explain your location there, David, if we can show them again on screen David's camera. This is by in between. This is okay, just a little worried about them on the site there. This is down from the Parliament buildings. Now we are going down one of the side streets. This is Metcalfe Street. You can see that police are dismantling many of the tents that were set up in that location for the past 3 weeks. We're now into the fourth weekend, and they're pushing protesters back down this street as well, because it's not just Wellington Street. There are a lot of offshoot of streets going down. You can see in front of the Parliament buildings here right now as well. This is the main parliamentary entryway in the front of the original ones. Let's go back to, I think, David, you're fine to talk again?
Yes, I am. We're heading into a big pile of snow here. So one effect of all of this, Hannah, is that the group of protesters are being sort of severed into pieces, that they are no longer one large group. This police action now pushing down multiple streets has had the effect of breaking people into groups. And instead of stopping after 10 meters, police continue to push forward, pushing, and there are more officers that have come into this side street, tactical officers here. This is as the crowd, you can probably hear around me, keeps chanting freedom, but they are being pushed back by this advancing line of police. We're now, Hannah, at the Sparks Street pedestrian mall, and that appears to be where things have stopped in this latest push. This is by far the biggest push, and as you see, typically, there is this ebb and flow. So as the police stop, protesters often move back towards their front lines, just getting our camera operator closer to that, to a higher position where he can show you everything that's happening. But you now see that line of police, so some have come into here, and it appears others have pushed into where the trucks were, but now they're dealing with a much smaller crowd because they've pushed people back into this area, Hannah.
Yeah, I just want to say you, Osama, and Chris Rands are doing a wonderful job down there. I only want you to stay safe, so tell us if you have to go at any point. But it seems like police have stopped pushing this group further down. As you mentioned, this is Sparks Street. You can see the street. That's a pedestrian street. That really, the businesses have been closed down there for now 4 weekends. Workers haven't been able to go in. People haven't been able to shop in that area. Now police are pushing the protesters out of that area, and it seems like a lot of them, David, are still lingering around, keeping an eye on what's happening with police. They don't seem to be going anywhere, the protesters.
Absolutely, but I do want to point out, Hannah, just sort of the effect here. Look at the number of officers who are here and know that there are others back there who are continuing to push in a different direction. Now, come over in this direction, and I know we're pointing into the sun, but you see it is now a much smaller group of protesters because that is what they've done by dividing people into groups. Now, there are lots of streets here. People can reinforce from different directions, but it is now a different dynamic where they are not, in short, they're not outnumbered. There are more police here now than there are protesters. Some of them, well, many of them, frankly, streaming live on social media and showing what's happening here. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, make no mistake, everything that is happening here now is being watched by tens of thousands of people across Canada, around the world, some with very polarizing positions opposite one another. All of us people, everybody here, someone who lives in Canada, if not a Canadian citizen. And, you just sit here and wonder when you see all of the polarizing talk of the last few weeks. I know that when you're in it like this, it's not really a time for a lot of context and seeing the bird's eye view. But you do worry. You do worry about the fissures within our society and what the last 2 years of pandemic have exacerbated. And there's lots of ways to interpret that. And, I just think that we can fairly say that there has been an exacerbation of some pre-existing tensions, a huge amount of misinformation, and a great worry about, what happens next. And I don't just mean on these streets, because it is very clear on the ground level that the police are very intent on clearing a large area today.
Yeah, very intent. And we're also showing another picture. Let me let you catch your breath there, David, for a second. You and Osama and Chris Rands doing fabulous work on the ground. Thank you for that. Here is another shot of police moving down Wellington Street. Now, I believe this is still in front of the Parliament buildings. They still have not yet passed the West Block, which is where, interestingly enough, is where the debate over the Emergencies Act is continuing. The democratically elected protest continues in spite of what we are seeing outside there currently. Then also, and I don't know if we can get this shot, I see it from above. It was police in a car and taking out all the contents of a vehicle. That's on output 113 for the control room, if they can see that. I was watching as police were pulling lots of bags out of a vehicle on a side street. There we go. There's that shot there. It's that red car. And I don't know if there's a person on the ground or not, but there is a red vehicle. It looked like that it's been parked there for quite some time. It's parked along with the trucks in this area. I'm not sure which street this is. It's pretty hard to tell, but they pulled someone or something out of someone. Yeah, thank you for zooming in on that. Someone, it looks like they're being arrested. Someone on the ground or things on the ground on the other side. Police have pulled that out. That was a part of the advance that we just saw. These are cars and vehicles that have been parked in this downtown core for the past 4 weekends. Police giving them multiple warnings to leave or be arrested. Have your cars impounded. Okay, that is in front of the Parliament buildings. I'm seeing now the fence. So clearly they are going into each and every one of those cars. They have a dog as well. Let me bring in Charles Bordelot, the former chief of police in Ottawa. I'm not sure if you can see these pictures that we're looking at now. It seems that the front line has moved, and now they're going through and searching each of these vehicles that have been parked there.
Yeah, that's correct. So, they've arrested obviously a couple of individuals that were found in those vehicles. What they're doing now is waiting for a support team to come in and assume control of those individuals that are arrested, and they'll take them to the prisoner vans. Again, they're searching each vehicle to make sure that they are safe. So those are most likely explosive units, the dogs, to ensure that there isn't anything that could cause harm to anybody from an explosive perspective. So they'll render those vehicles safe. And I think, as others have said, that you've seen in this last move here significant progress and leveraging the use of Metcalfe Street in order to break the crowd up, which makes it easier now from a tactical perspective. You are reducing the size of the crowds, so it's a little more manageable. But you have to have the resources in place to do that, and obviously they do have the resources. So you have a continued crowd on Wellington Street, and now you've got them pushing down Metcalfe Street.
Mr. Bordelot, let me just interrupt for a second. I want to go to our colleague on the ground, Thomas Degg, and we're seeing a truck now coming out. Thomas, tell me what's happening there.
We're on O'Connor Street near Queen Street here, and this is one of the big rigs, one of several we've seen pulling out just in the past few minutes. The threat from police has been very clear for some time now. Leave now or your vehicle will be towed. This is a man who is just pulling out, giving a thumbs up to protesters, high fives in some cases. And in some cases, people are leaving from the crowd on foot. It's unclear whether they're going to try to set up another site where they're going to be protesting and then again pushed back by police, or if they're now planning to go home entirely. We see at the top of the hill now another big rig pulling out, honking, being cheered by protesters. This is part of the operation to clear these big rigs that have been parked along Wellington for the more than 3 weeks now. And they've refused to leave. But with this aggressive police action today, gaining several hundred meters, pushing back protesters, and in some cases, I believe you saw some windows of vehicles and big rigs being broken. This is getting those big rigs to move. Some of the protesters we've spoken to say this has been a victory. They've gotten their message out. It has led to copycat protests overseas in France and New Zealand and elsewhere. And so they're painting this as a victory, even though many of them said they would stay camped out here until that the public health measures were dropped. Clearly, they have not all been. People walking towards our camera location here. Others, we're walking toward Wellington now, just to give you a sense, Hannah, and people at home who are not familiar with downtown Ottawa. There are still a number of protesters, despite the police operation. There's still many just standing around here. They've been divided. Some have been arrested, but we've not witnessed a significant series of arrests ourselves. Mainly police operation to clear the roads, clear the streets downtown. As you can see, there's still no traffic flowing here downtown, but the big rigs are moving, certainly.
Yeah, Thomas, that building straight in front of you is where the emergency debate on the Emergencies Act is taking place currently. This police operation is currently underway. I'll let you catch your breath and get up to Wellington Street and then wave when you want to come back on. I want to bring in Murray Faulkner, former London, Ontario Chief of Police. Mr. Faulkner, when you see those trucks leaving, they have had multiple warnings to leave up until this point, face arrest, fines. Will they still face fines at this point if they have left?
I would suspect they will. Not only fines, but outstanding parking tickets. $1,000 parking ticket is kind of unusual. Currently in the province of Ontario, if they're from Ontario, you can't renew your license plate unless you don't have any fines outstanding. And so we've heard from the mayor and that he's expecting that these parking tickets will have to be paid. So there's consequences. Whether there's criminal charges against these truckers, I'm not sure. There'd be pros and cons against both maneuvers.